How are we all? Let's get that in frame. Look at the beauty of that. Look at those background iconography and colours. A little bit different. Welcome. Thank you. Friday the 2nd of April. Hope you had a good first. I hope there wasn't too much foolery around the place. We're going to move forward on swiftly. Say welcome. Thank you. It's quite a profound presentation what I have for you today. In times of panic, in times of dismay, in times of uncertainty, in times of Christians and Muslims and Islamists asking me many and various questions to diversify faith, origins of faith, principality, the scales, as you will see there, beautiful. So it's all being going through a renaissance at the moment. I have a few scribes in mind here for this presentation. It's going to be a big one. If you know how to download and make an MP4 and an MP3 from the audio, this might be a good time to do so. Put me onto an MP3 and then listen to me whilst meditating in a field in the sunshine on an afternoon. Get into the right frame of mind. We're going to go on a trip, a big trip inside the I, and I think it will benefit a great many in different places. So it's in response to questions about life, creation, order, souls, autonomous, create questions from Christians and non-Christians alike, and now putting it into a pathway of which is further solidifying the principality. So I'm going to use a brother called Alan Watts, everyone. All right, yes, I hear the cheers. What? One of the most favourite videos and presentations I've seen of his. I'm going to bring to you heavily over the next few hours, and we're going to have some contrasts of the last 50 years on top of that. So inspired by a great many scribes and emails and questions, and using primarily great scholarly types that have passed before us, and to re-echo, re-emanate the sentiment behind all of that. So you would need to know, that you are going to get a torrent, and I'd like to hear your interaction. There's never been a time where we could, as a family, as a clan, as a group, as a bunch of sentient conscious minds, I want to see your input when these positions are put out there. I'd like to see what you interpret and how you termify certain things. So carpenters and potters, this is the monotheistic language, or the theological language that they use within the Bible. There is a codification there. So the carpenter and the potter are two particular roles that are played, for instance, in the scheme of things. So if you do want to say hello, comment accordingly. That's what I'm looking for. Like I say, if you're not ready for a surprise, be east, going east, traveling, getting wise. We're not going to break down Easter and the origins and the hijacking of and dates, rebirth of Christ, celebrating certain times of the year. We just are going to ride on that bank holiday weekend bonanza, Easter, be East special beast system, and I'm going to take joy in humouring you and taking you on a journey. Eustace Mullins has been brought to you recently. Neville Goddard. You're all familiar with Alan Watts. I've done some posts of late, and some have come back quoting, so there is a little bit of a twist of mine upon this. There are 46 pages. There are 24,000 words just shy. Welcome, initiates. We want to say hello to who's in the room. That would be polite. Anne. Yeah. Was just about to watch King of Kings. At your service, milady, mom, gentlemen, brothers. Bam. Old films, camera. Yeah. Good documentary on YouTube. Ancient Knowledge, part 1 to 7. Okay, thank you for that. Hello to the 8 watching now. Let's continue without further ado. we find ourselves wrapped and entwined within the duality of a fabric of both a legal and lawful matrix, and we have found out that we're all assumed members of a legal club. For those of you that are here now, and a lot of you that are new scribes, you are finding this out, okay? And one club that we did not knowingly consent and join in. So this is dedicated to Christians, Islamists, and Judaism, one of the more dangerous isms out there, schisms and isms. Deism in itself. Inspired by Alan Watt, Neville Goddard, Eustace Mullins, Christopher Hitchens, and rolled into one fun fact, 46-page bonanza adventure on the back of SPL's proclamation of sovereignty and part of our Christian disclosure. The life and essence exodus from public legal person unto private lawful, authentic, natural, human. So this is a big one. It's fat and juicy. There's plenty to pick from. And what? Do you believe we had a hit? Pardon me. Just as I was getting into it, flow. I'm on a secondary network. We will continue on. I'm going to talk about what there is. Now, the first thing, what we have to do is to get our perspectives with some background about the basic ideas we, which as Westerners living today in the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, etc., influence our everyday common sense. So the thing with common sense is it isn't all that common. Our fundamental notions about what life is, and there are historical origins for this which influence us more strongly than most realize. Ideas of the world which are built into the very nature of the laws and language that we use, and ideas of logic and what makes sense altogether. The law of attraction and the power of intent therefore could well be referenced to God carrying out judgment via universally inescapable quantum flux fields of modality and through a particle matrix of divine justice. The scales of life, the order, the balance, the fact of how these laws work, so just hold a thought on that. Think about it. The universe seems to have us in a court, 24/7. There are scales to be balanced in life's journey. Always help a traveller, as is the way. Authentic, natural human can choose to execute conscionable actions and deeds rather than mindless sin and ignorance of the facts of the matters. These basic ideas we will call myth, not using the word myth to mean simply something untrue, but to use the word myth in a more powerful sense. A myth is an image in terms of which we try to make sense of this world, and we at present are living under the influence of two very powerful images which are, in the present state of our scientific knowledge, extremely inadequate. One of our major problems today is to find an adequate, satisfying image of the world, a true account, a true reflection of who, what, why, where we are. So that's what we're going to talk about during the course of this presentation. Let's just see if anyone else has picked up the excitement. Jay, Tony, supporter Tony, in an extra special. Thank you for support of the channel. It is appreciated. Every little does help. This is a presentation for all, but it's part of your coursework of life, part of the Omega and the Alpha course, if you would like. So a little bit of an Egyptian backdrop, but not so much heavily reliant on that. I just thought it was better than the other one. I want to check that the systems are still on. Happy Good Friday. Yes. I want to check the comments before we set back off. Yes, getting straightened. That'll do nicely. We'll continue on then. So get a pen if you sat down and you're watching this in the comfort of. If you're out in the field and you're looking up at the sky and you're meditating, really, this will take you on a journey. And we're going to go quite far and deep, all right, to what image of the world to have and how we can get our sensations and feelings in accordance with the most sensible image of the world that we can manage to conceive. The two images which we've been working under for 2,000 years, maybe, and more. a long time. These two images are what they would call the models of the universe. The first is called a ceramic model, and the second is the fully automatic model. These aren't my models. These are models that have been put to me through the names that were mentioned at the beginning, the influencers, and they've helped me clarify my position, my status, my standing. You know, the works that we've put out collectively as a trust. There is a certain amount of meditation after that we go through, and looking at precepts, axioms, maxims, laws, writings, codifications throughout the lineages of history, antiquities, and we have to make decisions for ourselves. Each one of us have come to these decisions, and this is what this presentation is about. Okay, we have a conceptualization of ourself and the realm, and it is important that we discuss this in a little bit more depth. Ceramic and the fully automatic model. The ceramic model of the universe is based on the book of Genesis, from which Judaism, Islam, and Christianity derive their basic picture of the realm. And the image of the world in the book of Genesis is the world is an artifact. It is made, as though a potter takes clay and forms pots out of it, or as a carpenter takes wood and makes tables and chairs out of it. Check the feed. All right, just checking the room. I'm going to do that periodically and say nice one. So that's the title, where I've got the inspiration from right at the beginning for the title. It was going to be called Prickly Goo and Gooey Prickles, as you'll see later on, but I decided against that. I thought I'd try and be a bit more sensible. Do not forget, Jesus is the son of a carpenter and also the son of God. So the image of God and the world is based on the idea as God is a technician, a potter, a carpenter, an architect, who has in mind a plan and who fashions the universe in accordance with this plan. The Bible was written using very old and simple theological text base. The text that was used to construct the Bible and its many interpretations are based on an idealistic theological language typecast, and the passages, possible multiple translations and interpretations, become familiar to ones that to read these chapters and verses over time. There is a basic flow and energy. A familiarization was in the passages, chapters and verses across all forms of Bibles. So basic to this image of the world is the notion you see the world that consists of stuff, basically primordial matter, the primordial soup, substance, stuff. As pots are made of clay, and the potter imposes his will on it and makes it become whatever he wants. And so in the book of Genesis, the Lord creates Adam out of the dust of the earth. In other words, he makes a clay figurine and then he breathes into it and it becomes alive, because the clay becomes informed. By itself, it is formless, it has no intelligence, and therefore it requires the external intelligence and an external energy to bring it to life and to put some sense into it. And so in this way, we inherit a conception of ourselves as being artifacts, as being out of place artifacts, as being made. And it is perfectly natural in our culture for a child to ask its mother, how was I made, Mum? Or whom made me? And this is a very, very powerful idea. But for example, it's not shared by the Eastern philosophy. As we go east and look at the Eastern side from the West, and we be East, the Chinese or the Hindus, Indians would not ask its mother how it was made. An Eastern child might ask its mother, how did I grow? Which is an entirely different procedure for making. You see, when you make something, you put it together, you arrange its parts, or you work from the outside to the inside, as a sculptor works on a stone, or as the potter works on said clay. The study of Daniel and the involvement of clay, bronze, iron, gold, and etc. I find that particularly insightful for the lineages of writing the timeline from outside of the time about what will happen in the future, in particular versions of. When you watch something growing, it works in exactly the opposite direction. It works from the inside to the outside, and it expands, it burgeons, it blossoms, and it happens all over itself at once. In other words, in the original simple form of, say, ever living cell in the womb, it progressively complicates itself, and that's the growing process. It's quite different from the construction and making process. So there is, for that reason, a fundamental difference between the made and the maker. In this image, this ceramic model of the universe originated in cultures where the form of government was monarchical, and where therefore the maker of the universe was conceived also at the same time in the image of the King of the universe. King of kings, Lord of lords, the only ruler of princes or princesses, who dost from thy throne behold all dwellers upon earth, quoting the book of Common Prayer. And so, all those people who are orientated to the universe in that way feel related to basic reality as a subject to a king. And so they are on a very, very humble terms in relation to whatever it is that works this theoretical model. And we find it odd that in particular countries, those that are, attached to a public have quite a monarchical theory of the universe, because we are carrying over from very ancient Near Eastern cultures the notion that the Lord of the universe must be respected in a very, very certain way. People kneel, people bow, people prostrate themselves. You know what the reason for all that is. Nobody is more frightened of everybody else than a tyrant. Fact. He sits with his back to the wall and his guards on either side of him, and he has you facing downwards on the ground, flat out, because then you can't use weapons that way. When you come into his presence, you do not stand up. You don't face him, because you might attack. And he has reason to fear that you might attack him, because he's ruling you all. And the man who rules all is the biggest criminal of the lot. That would be the one who succeeded in the crime. The other people are pushed aside because they are the criminals. The people we lock up in jail, prison, they are simply the people who didn't make it, who got caught. It's only a crime if you get caught, you know. So naturally, the real boss sits with his back to the wall and his henchmen on either side of him. So when you design a church now, for instance, what does it look like, everyone? And what does that church inside resemble? All right, take a pew, ensconce yourself over there and let your mind paint pictures. A Catholic church with the altar as it used to be originally. It's changing now because the whole Catholic religion is under reformation. But the church has the altar with its back to the wall at the east end of the church. And there the altar is the throne, and the priest is the chief vizier of the court. And he is making basis to the throne, but from there is the throne of God, the altar, and all the people facing it, kneeling down, praying, you know, in the pews, etc. A great Catholic cathedral is called a basilica, as you've come to know what a basilica is and where the basilica is. And Italiano, the separate, smallest country on the face of earth, the Vatican City. It's a country in its own right, like London City and like Washington City, but you can walk across St. Peter's Basilica on the landmass, the country of the Vatican City, in a matter of hours, even some minutes. Basilica from the Greek, Basilius, which means king. So Basilica is the house of a king, and the ritual of the Catholic Church seems to be based on the court of rituals of Byzantium, no less. Now look at a Protestant church. It's a little different, but basically it's the same. The furniture now of a Protestant church is based on a judicial courthouse, or I would argue perhaps a judicial courthouse, actually the boat on the vessel on dry land, and a Protestant church furniture, apparatus, layout, colours, reflections, positions, titles, clerks, aisles, sails, boats, ensconcement on. I'm going to park myself here, I'm a boat on dry land for a moment. Doesn't look out of place. Nobody will notice me. Nothing to see. Move along. I'm just a boat on dry land. So from a Protestant church, based on a judicial courthouse, it would seem to the pulpit, the judge in a court wears a black robe. He wears exactly the same dress as a Protestant minister. When I and Andy Smithy met the clergy, the principality, out at Alderhay in Liverpool, he was dressed fully black with a little white bit there, and we talked to the father, the representative of the the Holy Seas, and the man that could grant the rites of passage, and he was very dark and very black, very tall, very olive skinned, and he got on the phone to the I don't know, the consulate and somebody else, and talked in Italian very fast, and came back and ran off. So I've dealt and seen these in persona, them in persona, and I've felt the friction of common sense, love, and business needing to be done, and confliction within a man who purports to be a symbol of all that is holy, good, love, authority. And when push comes to shove, business needs to be done. Words are expressed, not uttered, but be known. Man runs off, and very awkward and weird, for the mind to see. But I can speak to you from a lot of points and perspective about certain things, courts, judges, positions, and a lot from having skin in the game, much as Kevin does, much as what you do with your comments, which is why we're so strong and effective in what we do. We don't rely upon hearsay. All right. So yes, the judge wearing the black, the officers wearing black, the Black's Law, Black's Dictionary, black in itself, black ink. All right, so there's a commonality again within the codes. It's not really that difficult once you keep making and connecting the dots. So the minister, Protestant minister, in a court, everybody sits in boxes. There's a jury in a box. There's a box for the judge. There's a box for this. There's a box for that. There are pews. They are the pews, effectively, an ordinary kind of colonial type. The Protestant church is what we're comparing to, all right, to a magistrate or even the High Court. The positions are pretty much the same, just the jurisprudence and jurisdiction and inherent implied authorities somewhat fluctuate, and so do the tierages of the at-law levels you will find yourself at. Is this a court of equity? That one definitely is. This man knows it. So one is the king and the other is the judge. Your honour, there is sense in this. Some sense, it's their way of when you're at court and you're angry, to keeping the honour with the judge. It stops people entangled in litigation from losing their tempers and getting rude. We obviously say my honour. There is a certain sense, but when you want to apply the image to the universe itself, to the very nature of life, it has limitations. For one thing, the idea of a difference between matter and spirit, this idea doesn't work anymore. Long ago, physicists stopped asking the question, what is matter? I saw a Tom in the comments there. I know that you know, and you know that I know. I'm not fond of asking, but for the others, we continue on, repete, and we embellish. The scientists began that way. They wanted to know what is the fundamental substance of the world, and the more they asked that question, the more they realized they in fact couldn't get any closer to the answer. It remained at the same distance. It was a perpetually enduring relationship, because if you're going to say in fact what the basic fundamental principle of matter is, you've got to describe it in terms of behavior. That is to say, in terms of form, in terms of pattern. You describe what that actual matters, actions, what it does. You describe the smallest shapes of it that you can see: atoms, electrons, protons, mesons, all sorts of subnuclear particles. But you never actually arrive at the basic stuff, because it appears there might not be any. There are some shapes there that is, the name escapes me now, triangular shapes that go together, tetragrammaton, tetra something maybe. What happens is this: stuff is a word for the world as it looks when our eyes are out of focus, all fuzzy. Stuff, the idea of stuff is that it's undifferentiated as some kind of a goo. And when your eyes are not in sharp focus, everything tends to look fuzzy. When you get your eyes into focus, you see a form, you see a pattern. And so all that we can talk about is patterns. So the picture of the world in the most sophisticated physics of today is not formed by stuff, potted clay, but pattern, a self-moving, self-designing pattern. A dance, you might say. There's no R in dance, David. Okay, a dance. A damn good knees up mother brain. And we haven't yet, our common sense as individuals hasn't caught up with this. Did somebody say Ian Brown? No, I said knees up mother brain. Well, now in the course of time, in evolution of Western thought, the ceramic image of the world ran into trouble and changed into what we call the fully automatic model or image of the world. In other words, Western science was based on the idea that there are laws of nature, and that it got that idea from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. That, in other words, the potter, the maker of the world in the beginning of things, lay down the laws and the law of God, which is also the law of nature. The laws: Hermes, Trismegistus, Thoth, the law, governance, regulatory control on a non-civil level, on a universal atomic level. It is called also another word you've heard others mention, logos. What is the logos? The Christos, logos. And in Christianity, the logos, the second person of the Trinity, incarnate as Jesus Christ. I like to say Christ Jesus, who thereby is the perfect exemplar of the divine law, one to be sovereign, sovereignty, sovereign, good, self, conscionable, alert, governance. No need to refer to a book, no need to phone a friend, no need to 50-50. Do you want a 50-50 it? No, actually, I'm going to go ahead, Chris. We're going for the big one, and we're going with no options, straight for it, with the confidence, because we walk like we've already won and we're already there. The knowing and the knower, the knower and the knowings. So the laws of nature is called the logos in Christianity, the logos being the second person of the Trinity, incarnate as Christ Jesus, who thereby is the perfect exemplar of the universal hermetic natural divine law, which is how sovereignty and sovereign good self-governance comes to be, because you don't have to refer, it's more of an instinct, and you can manage yourself okay. All right, so the logos is very, very powerful terminology of the mind, body, soul, consciousness, energy, balance, head, heart, gut, confidence, and moving forward. All right, we've tended to think of all natural phenomenon as responding to laws, as if, in other words, the laws of the world were like the rails on which a car or a tram or a train runs, and all these exist in a certain way, and all events responds to these laws. You know that limerick, or you might not know that limerick, but you do now. There was a man who said, damn, for it certainly seems that I am a creature that moves in determinate grooves. I'm not even a bus, I'm a tram. So here's this idea. So here's this idea that there's a kind of plan and everything responds and obeys to that plan. Well, in the 18th century, Western intellectuals began to suspect this idea. What they suspected is whether there is a lawmaker or whether there is an architect of the universe or not. And they found out what they reasoned, that you don't have to suppose that there is. Why? Because the hypothesis of God does not help scientists or man to make any predictions. In other words, let's put it this way. If the business of science is to make predictions about what's going to happen, science essentially is prophecy. Prophecy, heresy. What's going to happen by studying the behavior of the past and describing it carefully is that we can make predictions about what's going to happen, possibly maybe in the future. That's really the whole of science. And to do this and to make successful predictions, you do not need to know God as a hypothesis, because it really makes no difference to anything. If you say everything is controlled by God, everything is governed by God, that doesn't make any difference to your prediction of what is going to happen for you. And so what they did is simply drop the hypothesis, but they kept the hypothesis of law and regulatory control. Because if you can predict, as you saw with the string theory that's now gone to quantum theory, okay, so if you can predict, if you can study past and describe how things have behaved, and you've got some regularity in the behavior of the universe, you may tend to call that universal law. Hello. So although it may not be law in the ordinary legal sense of the word to the ones from the London Sun Temple BAR Society, it's simply regularity, regulation, law. And so what they did is they got rid of the lawmaker and they kept law, and so they conceived the universe in terms of a mechanism, something, in other words, that is functioning according to regular clocks, like mechanical principles. Newton, the whole image of the world is based on billiards. The atoms are billiard balls and they bang into and around each other. Behavior, every individual is therefore defined as a very, very complex arrangements of billiard balls on a subatomic level, being banged around by everything else, and so the chaos theory. So behind a fully automated model of the universe is the notion that reality itself is, to use the favorite term of the 19th centurists, blind energy. It's just blind energy. There is no creator, there is laws, stuff's happening, but we don't understand it. reference the metaphysics of T.H. Huxley, for one. The world is basically nothing but blind, unintelligent force. And likewise, in parallel to this, in the philosophy of Freud, the basic psychological energy, or the psychological part of energy, is referenced as libido, that which is blind lust. Look at monkeys and how they pick their ladies, you know, blind lust. You've seen them documentaries where the monkey just jumps on the rear portion, and then you know, that kind of basic raw. Not that we are, I would say it's an insult to chimpanzees to say that we are much like a chimp or in chimp-like nature at all, but there are elements of, much as there is elements of other chromosomes, DNA and genetical materials from. So blind lust creation, this is where religion and same-sex marriages and the ways into same-sex partnerships were frowned upon, and there was a little bit of grating, we'll say, a bit of controversy, because marriage is what? It's just a legal agreement, it's a legal transaction. Marriage is nothing to do with love. A Christian core, Catholic traditional marriage, you notice the difference to Mormons for America, and we'll say over here Islam and Muslims, Islamists of Islam faith over here, totally different to white man marriage. Other religions and cults and ways that they operate, not cults that any of them are cults, but cults as well as those separate too. Notice that there's something not right about the way that things are done, and it's more about monies, estates, management. Look exactly where marriages come from, why marriages were created. It was a way of managing and securing assets, land, blood, lineages and things. It didn't start from love. So you know, the blind energy is libido. Energy is blind, you know, psychological, why it moves, Freudian philosophy. And apparently it's only a fluke as a result of pure chances, that resulting from the exuberance of all of this blind, mad, chaotic energy, that there are people, man's consciousnesses, sorry, but I'm saying it like the scholarly types as well, that there are people, there is man, there is consciousness with values, with reasons, with consciousness, with languages, with cultures, and with big love. Just like a fluke, you know, if you give 1,000 monkeys typing 1,000 typewriters for 1,000,000 years, they will eventually type the Encyclopedia Britannica. And of course, the moment they stop typing the Encyclopedia Britannica, they will relapse into nonsense. And so in order that shall not happen, because you and I are flukes in this cosmos, and we like our way of life, we like being human. If we want to keep it, save these people, we've got to fight nature, because it'll turn us back into nonsense moment we let it. And so we've got to impose our will upon this world as if we were something completely alien to it from outside. And so we get this culture based on the idea of the war between man and nature. We talk about the conquests of space, Everest. The great symbols of cultures are rockets and bulldozers, rockets, compensation for the sexually inadequate male, obelisks and the sort. Let me just go to the chat room, see what the flow is, see what we are saying. And rolling from the top. I got to Tony, I believe. Jay. Atom, perfectly balanced from Yar. Today's perfect day to be happy. Yes, Jay. Bruce Lipton, iced tea, PhD, is an interesting listen. Indeedy. Greg Braden, to boot. Aboriginal, abnormal, original, funny word from Yar. Yes, Anne. Interesting. The first police station in Hartlepool was said to be a Dutch vessel dragged onto shore. Interesting fact from Jay. I like the fact-checking facts of that. Fact-checked. That's not the crazy. You know, when you have a cube drawn on paper, it changes shape as you look at it. That's what the English language is, based on a sense, down to interpretation. The truth is objectified, and when you look at the truth with different consciousness expansions and different areas of knowledge and wisdom, then you see different truth, but it's the same thing you've been looking at since day dot, but you've now can see a different picture. It's the same thing, but you've got the different perspective, the image that's formed behind the eyes. Yeah, so I like that. It's legalese. I've met and told someone now refusing to speak English. Well done, Anne. As we say, legalese. It's deception. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. The art of war. War is deception. Deception, giving us a language that's foreign, that looks like the home OED. You know, when it sounds like it, it writes like it. It legalese, that is, writes like English, sounds like English, which isn't English. Part of our Christian disclosures to point out that it's a foreign language. So we can't use that for number one. Number two, do not convert for the purposes of clarity and the avoidances of doubt. We've been putting in our paperwork for years. We are not speaking legalese, and do not convert it into legalese. Do not securitize this instrument. This is not a security instrument. Various things of private conduct and the state administration that we go on. And I thought, yes, deception, war, that's how we come to the conclusion we're at war. A book from 500 BC that's very relevant today. Technology changes, institutions, civilization changes, but man's ability for blind lust and greed, power and war is basically simple, fundamental aspects. Love and hate, the same spectrum, the synthesis, and what we get to the antithesis, and where we see ourselves within all of this is the same as thousands of years ago. But technology, clothing, attire has changed, the way that we elocution, pronunciation, you know what, hello, all of this. So deception, weapons of mass deception, and etc. The double tap, the double tongue, double speak, the greed, you know that. And if you're not doing it up front and you're being deceptive, you're not being honourable, you don't have clean hands. So it can only be an act of war to deceive someone from a portion of the landmass which is a separate country and not actually the landmass. Let's get back to it. Thanks for all that interjection. So we're going to conquer space. Yeah, we're already in space, whether we're flat or we're round. Yeah, we're already out there in space. If you think about it, if anybody can be sensitive enough to have a look outside, if your eyes are clear enough, aided indeed by telescopes, radio astronomy, all kinds of sensitive instruments we can devise, we're as far out in space as we are ever actually likely to get. Whether we be stuck, whether we be spinning, whether we be on a turtle, whether we be blue mandala, we're out in something, and it's big. And you know, to conquer space, the seas of space, the terminology there, the UCC and the codifications of stretch out all across the seas of commercial space, you know. Putting a flag on the moon, claiming it, the race to go to the moon first, and we got there first, it's ours, we claim it, you know. That's how things kind of work there. Madness. But you know, sensitivity isn't the pitch in especially the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, aka WASP, culture of the United Kingdom, states, commonwealths in general. We define manliness in terms of aggression because we're all a little bit frightened whether we are really men. So we put on this great show of being a tough guy, tough girl, tough woman. Is completely unnecessary. If you have what it takes, you would therefore not need to put on that show. You do not need to beat nature into submission. Why be hostile to nature or to one another? In the, you know, because after all, you is a symptom of nature. You as a human being, you grow out of this physical universe just in exactly the same way that an apple grows off an apple tree. So let's say the tree which grows apples is a tree which apples. Using apple as a verb, and in a world which human beings arrive, then that would be a world that peoples. And so the existence of people is symptomatic of the kind of universe we live in, just as spots on somebody's skin could be symptomatic of ill health or chickenpox. We have been brought up by reason of our two great myths, the ceramic and the fully automatic, not to feel that we belong in the world. So our popular speech reflects it. You know, we say, I came into this world. You didn't. You came out of the world. Fact. You came out of your mum, out of the waters, a product of. So that's quite a nice way of looking at the laws and the universality of it all, and that you can't be in something and be separate to it. We say, let's face facts. We talk about encounters with reality as if we had a head-on meeting of completely alien agencies, and the average person has the sensation that he is somewhat a something that exists inside a bag of skin, the center of consciousness which looks out of this thing. You know, I recognize you. You look kind of like me, and I've seen myself in a mirror. You look like you might be people. So maybe you're intelligent, maybe you could love too. Perhaps you are okay. You are, since some of you are anyway, you got the right colour skin, you got the right religion or whatever it is there. But all those people over in and over, they're not really people. You know, when you want to start war and you want to destroy somebody, you always define them as unpeople, not really human. Monkeys, maybe idiots, maybe machines, maybe terrorists, but not people. You get me? We have this hostility to the external world because of the superstition of the myth of the unfounded theory that you yourself only exist inside your skin. Now, I want to propose another idea altogether. I know the astronomers, they either say there was the primordial explosion, enormous Big Bang millions of years ago, billions of years ago, which flung the galaxy, sent to space. Let's just take that for the sake of argument and say that that is the way that it happened. It's like you took a bottle of ink and you threw it at a wall and it smashes. All that ink spreads. In the middle it's dense, isn't it? And as it gets out to the edge, little droplets and finer and finer, more complicated patterns to be found. So in the same way, with regards to the Big Bang, at the beginning of things, in the beginning, it spread out. And you and I sitting here in this room as complicated, sentient, authentic man, human beings, are way, way out on the fringe of that bang, where the complicated little patterns, think of the Mandelbrot pattern. Those of you that have watched the animated digital reference of the Mandelbrot and the complicated little patterns are found out on the very end of it. Very interesting. We define ourselves as being only that. If you think you are only inside your skin, then therefore you design yourself as one very complicated little dot way out on the edge of that explosion, way out in space and way out in time. Billions of years ago, you was a Big Bang, and now you're a complicated human being, authentic human being. And then we cut ourselves off like this, and we don't feel that we're the Big Bang, but you are it. It depends as you define yourself. You are actually, if this is the way things started, if there was a Big Bang in the beginning, you can't be anything but. You are not something that is a result of the Big Bang on the end of the process. You are still that process and applicable to those laws of that particular universe. You are, in essence, then the Big Bang, the original force of the universe, coming on as whomever you are, commonly known today. You see, when I meet you, I don't just see John, Steve, Helen, Nonna, Kevin, as they define themselves by their commonly known as, but I see you as the universe itself, the primordial energy of the universe coming on at one another in this way. I know I am that too. I've learned to define ourselves as separate from it though, sometimes previously. So what I would call a kind of the basic problem is we've got to envisage and go through first is to understand that there are no such things as things. That is to say separate things or separate events. That is only a way of talking to mentalize things, left and right, up and down, yes and no. If you can understand this, you're going to have very little further problems. I once asked a group of high school children, what do you mean by a thing? And at first they all gave all sorts of synonyms. They said it's an object, which they simply another word for a thing. It doesn't tell you anything about what you mean by thing. Finally, a very smart girl from Italy who was in the group said, a thing is actually a noun. And she is quite right. A noun isn't part of nature, it's part of speech. There are no nouns in the physical world. There are no separate things in the physical world either. So when we look at the evidence of life, essence, incarnation, the exodus from public legal person to private, lawful, authentic, human. We look at name. What is a name? A name starts with a capital letter. It describes an object or a thing. This is the Oxford OED style. Then we look at person. Later on, I'll get down to person for you. Persona, mask, persona, through. And what's going on with all of the Latin, the legalese, the foreign languages, and the usurpation, the subjugation, and to some extent the supposition we've gone through with our conceptualization of this insanity stemming from 1067 and the country of the corporate city of London as we know it, that is a foreign landmass full of foreigners. You know, it's amazing they don't actually have borders there, because that's effectively the same as what it is. except we have a Schengen agreement. The Queen, she does have to make an appointment and ask the Lord Mayor and the Chief Executive of the corporate city of London for permission to go in there. There are particular denotations of which we were digging. We thought, hang on, yes, that all sounds rather swell, but is that in fact true, or is that just more, fuel for the fire brought on by the ones employed to divert and distract us? Turns out there were certain clues of which we had to dig further, and then the pennies and the cogs turned, and we realised, by Jove, we've been hoodwinked. So nouns, names, objects, things, very relevant, very practical, more argumentative and plausible than other positions that we found ourselves in, and arguments that we've been doing vexatiously, non-logically, that don't get us out of anywhere pretty fast, but just keep us still, keep us seeking, not actually progressing incrementally forward in a motion such as progression does. The physical world is wiggly: clouds, mountains, trees and people, and we are all like Mr. Soft, that advert, Mr. Soft, and he was all like, and it was all squishy. I know I'm advertising a brand of mints there, but that's going back 20 odd years at least. He lived in a wiggly, soft world. The world today being soft, non-linear, non-rectangular, non-90 degrees and wiggly. When human beings get to work at things, they build stuff square and in linear straight lines. They make out the world really isn't wiggly. And here we are sitting in rooms built on straight lines, but each one is in fact as wiggly as a wiggle. Have yourself a giggle at that. Now, if you want to get control of something that wiggles, it's pretty difficult. You try and pick up a fish in your hands, the fish is wiggly and it will slip out and escape. So what do? To get a hold of a fish, you would use a net generally. The net is the basic thing that we have for getting hold of wiggly things in a wiggly world. If you want to get hold of this wiggle, us, to be compared to wiggles in a black and white rectangular square 90-degree angle world, then we'd have to have nets put over us. If you're a free spirit and you feel that you're shackled in the chains of, and you're being forced and lineared and kettled and your rights are being stripped away, and you don't know how to call upon, and you feel that there is an invisible force kind of in the distance and through words and letters and notices and telephone calls and your next steps, what you should do next, okay? As brother Robert put on the observation deck with his chat with Dr. Graves, and the sub neuro-linguistic programming mind control that comes from an automated computer internet generated letter from a corporation that we let in turn influence our wiggly world when it comes from the square black and white world of doom. We have to draw the line, we have to zip that and whoa, put the handbrake on, let's do a turn, back it up. All right, you see where we're coming from, the wiggly world. So in order to do this, you can number the holes in the net, and you can have so many holes up and so many holes across, X and Y axes. And if you can number and reference these holes in the net, you can count exactly where each wiggle is in terms of the hole in the net. And that would be the beginning of calculus and the art of measuring the world. In order to do that, we've got to break up the wiggle into bits, and we have to call this a specific bit, and you have to give them labels, the next bit and bits of the wiggle and the next bit, etc. So these things are events, bits of wiggles, which we mark up in order to talk about the wiggle, in order to measure it, and therefore in order to what? To execute some kind of control over it. In nature, in fact, the physical world, the wiggle, it isn't broken up into bits. You have to cut up the food in order to eat it, in order to bite it. It doesn't come already bitten. The world does not come thinged, and it doesn't come evented. You and I are as much all continuous with the physical universe as a wave, and the wave is continuous with an ocean. Is it a particle? Is it a wave? It's kind of both at the same time. He started the fire, the ocean waves and the physical, the universe. Let's compare that. The ocean makes waves, and the universe peoples. And as a wave, I wave at you and say, Shabba. The world is waving at me with you and saying, hi, I am here. We are consciousness of the way that we feel. So in trust talk and in laws and languages, we say conscionable. We would argue that that would be an unconscionable thing for a trustee to do in their fiduciary capacity. And now we found out and we corrected that trust relationships, and we look at conscionable and unconscionable indentured styles of trusts. I went, hang on, I recognise this kind of terminology. What? And I've seen it somewhere before. I get this certain deja vu of language. So conscience, things, conscience and consciousness has been influenced so that each one of us does not feel, we feel that we've been hypnotized in some way. A civilization with amnesia is another way to put it, literally hypnotized by social conventions. Adverts, COVID, feel like you've got it. What do you mean feel like we've got it? Some kind of zany neuro-linguistic mind control being put to play there. In some ways, what you think, and how you are and your mental state, the power, the laws that are there, universal, from Thoth, Hermes, Hermeticism, natural, they know this, and there's a way of playing a game. So when we talk about social convention, billionaire business media tycoons getting together with government and making plans and contracts and forming World Economic Forums and doing stuff behind closed doors, coming out into the public and overlaying it upon us like we all voted for it, like we put somebody in Parliament. What's happening now in a legislative rule, not riots, that's the wrong word, to control protests, like they're riots, when they're man's free speech to exercise in a certain way. Lawfully object is one word and terminology I would put it. Does anybody agree with what's being passed by the lobbyists, who lobbyists are, what interests they have, corporations, acting as governments? Governments are corporations, so therefore we have a breakage up of, and who's deciding these laws? Are they beneficial for? Whose voice is getting heard? How are they getting put through? How does it come to be a corporation benefits over man, sentient, when we put them, man, in the forefront? Man created government, and it was government that then created persons. So we see the line of the control of the lineage and the social convention of which is happening right now. Things like Facebook asking you if you'd like to give blood. If you'd like, Facebook media giant there is actually after man's blood. When I saw that late at night, I thought, what do you mean? Add your phone number, join WhatsApp, tell us about your blood, get check in here, give it, what is the data that's being asked for in the social convention, and the contrivedness of the harnessing of data in a voluntary way is such that they say, here, look, it's a bonus to you. It's a real privilege and a benefit. What would be a real privilege and a benefit would be as if you got access to the funds and the credits as the beneficiary by contributing to all of the tax and the usurpation that the state and the city and the corporate landmass of London and its affiliate agencies take off you. And when you land on your ass, you had that same kind of access to and data intelligently being managed as it is there for the wealth of corporations to sub-manage and put further nets upon reality to enslave you into less rights and liberties to what you have. If that technology and that, think about it, block is stop, chain is this, so blockchain, stop chain technology that's being influenced now could be implemented. So when man needed credits and money and rent paying and food, water, shelter, all the basic amenities of life to stop you being a bum on the street as a homeless, jobless, worthless, this isn't my terminology, but this is what's happening out there. And the technology that we have that I've pointed out and we've shown you that is working for the corporate greed of many in getting taken and put into shell companies and offshore tax havens and all legally, is now suddenly not available to pay hundreds of thousands, millions of furloughed and unemployed out of this chaos that they've ensued from this social convention. The whole data about what's going on of this social contrived convention, I can't hang around on this because I'm on page 8 of 46. And it's going to take a while. So that's what we kind of are arguing about there. And you are made to feel and sense that we only exist inside our skin. We are not the original Big Bang, but just something insignificant on the end of it. You're indispensable. Yeah, you're nothing. There's many of you. You're 10 a penny, to be fair. You ain't get another of you tomorrow. when you're unique, you're original, you're indispensable, and you're made in the Creator's image. So that's where you argue your depression, your ill health, your inability to mentalize, your inability to differentiate, the way that you split yourself into two, and you have the known and you have the knower. You go through these we need to bring that back and dispel, and much through our remedy, through the public into the private, and with the argumentation, the mitigation of any such public civil liabilities, duties and obligations, and who in fact really should be where, and what is going off, and rewinding, bow selectoring. It's re-eat wine when SPL say pro selector. So we've become scared stiff in a way, in our own skins, thinking that we're separate too, and that your wave is going to be put out, your candle in the wind is going to disappear, that you're going to die. We've got a mythology going on now, which is, Father Maskell may have put it, we are nothing but something that happens between the maternity ward and the crematorium, and that is it. You are born and then you die. Enjoy that. Rewind selector. Therefore everybody kind of feels unhappy and miserable. This is what people really believe today. You may go to church, you may say that you believe that this is, how it is, and, and the other, but you really don't believe it. Even Jehovah's Witnesses, who are the most fundamentalists, they're polite when they come round and knock at the door, but if they really believed in Christianity, they would be screaming in the streets. But nobody does. They would be taking full-page ads out in the paper, but nobody does. All that gold in the Vatican. What's he doing with that gold there? What's happening with that gold, you gold hoarder? Nazi gold in the bottom of the Vatican, in the catacombs with the bones. We move on. You would have the most terrifying television programs. The churches would be going out of their very minds if they really believed what they teach, as Hitchens put it quite well, articulately, many times, but they don't. I could stop there, but I won't. They think they ought to believe what they teach, that they believe they should believe. They believe, but they don't believe it. What? Christianity, George Carlin, it's a great idea and premise. When do we start putting it into practice? Because what we really believe is the fully automatic model, that our basic plausible common sense, that you're a fluke, you are a separate event, and you did run away from the maternity ward to the crematorium, and now that's it. Now, why does anybody indeed think that way? There's no reason to. And there isn't even, a scientific, plausible reason to think like that. It's just a myth invented by people who may have wanted us to feel a certain way when they want to play a certain game. See, the game of God begotten got embarrassing. The idea of God as the potter, the architect of the universe, he is God. Who is God? And makes you feel that life, after all, is important, that there is someone who cares. It has meaning, it has sense. Your own personal Jesus, Depeche Mode playing again. You are valuable in the eyes and the heart of the Father, but after a while it gets embarrassing, and you realise that everything you do is in fact being watched by God up above. He knows your tiniest, innermost feelings and thoughts, and you may say after a while, quit following me. I do not want you around. So you may become an atheist just to get rid of that positioning. Then you feel terrible now because you may have got rid of God, which means in reality you've probably got rid of yourself. You've got rid of yourself. You're nothing but the machine, and your idea that you're a machine is just a machine too. So if you're smart, you may choose to commit suicide. Came has said there is only one really serious philosophical question, which is whether or not to commit suicide. I think there are 4 or 5 serious philosophical questions. The first one is, who started it? The second, are we going to make it? The third, where are we going to put it? The fourth, who is going to clean up? And the fifth, is it serious? But should you or should you not commit suicide? That is indeed a good question, and it's on everybody's lips quite a lot of the time. Some of the time may have been at some point it's on a lot of people's right now. What is the point? Why should I carry on? You're not criminals, you're not guilty. Christianity makes you feel guilty, dirty little sinners that was cast out. So suicide, I'd like to just stop everything, because this is the author's and the man's writings here, but it's applicable. You don't think of that. You as soon as that creeps in, the devil, we look at it, the words of Satan, Beelzebub, and the devil, demonic thoughts creeping in, it never should one. And the fact that we do, and we feel the lack of support, isolated, let down, failures, is testament to how there is no, you know, and anchorage of that, and solidarity and respect, anywhere to support, love, concern. There are a few places, but as you will see, I believe they're about to get very busy, and we'll continue on. So in philosophical realms, you know, we've talked about death and a civil death, not being publicly active, going into the army, going into the clergy. Man would suffer a civil death, and you would stop, commit, stop committing the action in public, and you would now executing deeds in the private. So that's again committing a civil death. We don't physically mean the death and goodbye Vienna, but what we mean is the transforming of self-consciousness, and it is a marvelous, incredible blossoming of a flower journey. And death, and the card in tarot, death doesn't always mean you're going to die. It may mean the end of a cyclical system, a cyclical, and the beginning of a new, the opening of a door. So yeah, self-committing suicide is a good question philosophically. Why go on? You only go on if the game is worth it. Now, the universe has been going on, it seems, for an incredibly long time, and it can be proven. And so a real satisfactory of the universe has to be one that's worth betting on. If you're going to lie to yourself, it may as well be a good lie. Or if you're going to know something, you may as well know the truth. Most of us are here for the latter, and would like to now finally cognize and claircognizance, realize with real eyes what indeed the truth of the foundational aspects of reality are, the fundamental basic principles. When we say subatomic, quantum, particle, angelic or non-angelic matrix, that's what's going off through the levels of communications, on these levels of which furthermore included page 9 of 46. Yeah, it seems to be, to me, a very absolutely elementary common sense. If you make a theory of the universe which isn't worth betting on, why bother? Just commit suicide. But if you want to go on playing the game, you've got to have an optimal theory for playing the game. Otherwise, there is no point in playing it. If you're going to play it to win. Go hard or go home, Club of Rome. But the people who coined the fully automatic theory of the universe were playing a very funny game, as we've come to see. Very intricate, dark game. What they wanted to say was this: you know, all the people that believe in religion are old ladies and wishful thinkers. You have a big daddy up there, you know, and you want comfort. You know, life is rough. You know, life is tough, and success only comes to the most hard-headed of people. There's a film that I'm going to think and reference now called I Care a Lot, and she references at the beginning of that about life and how to get successful, millionaire, business type, and she rips people off. Not to ruin the plot of the film, but she rips off the wrong type. If you've seen I Care a Lot, you'll know exactly what I'm saying. That isn't the correct way to go through life either. So you know, this is a very convenient theory. When the European, American, Eastern world was colonizing the natives everywhere else, and the West was colonizing the East, you know, we're the end products of evolution, and we're tough. We're big, strong guys, and life is just a bunch of rubbish, really, nonsense, and we're going to impose our will on it and into something else. And you know, it's a way of flattering yourself, to be fair. And so it's become academically plausible and fashionable, but this is the way the world works. In academic circles, no other theory of the world other than the fully automatic model is respectable, because, you know, you've either, again, at school, they should be condemned for that. In the beginning, there was God and Jesus and Mary, and you're all little and you're in the school play and you're doing the nativity and you're learning about Jesus and Mary and the certain things of religion and the way that they teach it you there. And then you get into secondary primary schools, and they start teaching you scientific theories of Big Bang and how the world all started in the beginning. Out of nothing came something, which makes one of the most fundamental theories of, you know, physics in itself. And we'll break our own rules to make something work in a way. But that's the intricacy of the subatomic and the quantum. What you would expect to find, you don't find. Solid is actually empty matter. So the world, the academic, plausible, fashionable way the world works in academic circles, they have been forced to go a certain way. Now here goes the fun part. If you're an academic person, you've got to be intellectually tough. You have to be prickly. And there are allegedly, by Alan's words, two kinds of philosophy. One is called prickles and the others is called goo. And prickly people are precise, rigorous, logical. They like everything chopped up and clear. And goo people, they like it vague and foggy. For example, in physics, the prickly people believe that the ultimate constituents of matter are particles, and goo people believe it's waves. We look at the double slit experiment, we see that particles can be, waves and particles at the same time. It's not, it doesn't compute. If it's watched, it acts in a certain way. If it's not watched, it acts in a different way. And in philosophy, prickly people are logical positives and goo people are idealists, and they're always arguing with each other. And that what they don't realize is that neither one can take their position without the other person, as you wouldn't know you advocated prickles unless there was somebody else advocating goo. You wouldn't know what a prickle was unless you know what goo was. But life is not either prickles or goo. It's gooey prickles and prickly goo. Now that's fantastic. That's duality from let's look at some comments. All right, that's Alan from a long time ago, the ghost of Watt, Alan Watt, not Alan Watts, but Alan Watt. And skimming the chat just to see. Wendy, thank you. We miss you too. I missed that one. Who else we got? Jerry, G-Man. Religion is for wars and control. That is religion of science also. Agreed. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Jimi Hendrix. I like it. The power. Boom. Vibrations. Tune. The message is in music. You need power only when you want to do harm. Otherwise, love is enough to get everything done. Charlie Chaplin. Bosch from Brother J. Why, there is things as actors have no power or authority over man or woman. That's it, from G-Man. Don't look or sound the same. A sound, pound, dollar, meaning. Signs and symbols, pounds and dollar, another combination of mixing jurisdictions, rendering it all a fraud. Deception. War is deception, G-Man. Wanting to change the world, start with yourself, from Brother J. If we all consented on our own monsters inside, there'd be no monsters outside. From Yar. I take it everyone's seen them new trailers with drops of blood in them. No, Jay. Another video. When we get Kevin and we go public en masse, we'll talk about that. Yes, we will. Just check that a bit better. Happy bum, unhappy slave. There's a twin asteroid heading to Earth. They're trying to knock off course. Latin name for twin dragons, maybe. Sweet. Skating My Head Productions posters a good vid on those sneakers. Shaking my head, not skating. Dyslexia rules KO. The kingdom within, he sees all through the eyes of the victim and the attacker. Jerry, preach. I like that. Cats per other cells called imaginary cells that take over and turn into a butterfly. Yes, yeah. Yeah. Can't wait to explain the jam walls. Walls come tumbling down from Anne Claire. Yay, hello, welcome. Gansders, Merlin's assistants. Okay, we're going to continue on with the reading. Thank you for the thumbs up. Please share. The Carpenter and the Potter. Fundamental precepts of reality, self, soul's mind, consciousness, knowing, knower, knowing, gooey prickles and prickly goo. They all go together like back and front, male and female. That's the answer to philosophy. We are philosophers in our own right, and we're not going to argue very much, because if we don't argue with one another, we don't know what we think. So if we argue, we can say thank you, because owing to the courtesy of taking different points of view, we understand what we all mean. The master brain, as Napoleon Hill put it. So we can't really get rid of one another, and it's great that we're all different and have these little intelligent, intellectual, respectful argumentations on life itself. However you see this whole idea, the universe is nothing at all but an intelligent force playing around and not even enjoying it. That's a put down theory of the world. People who had an advantage to make gameplay by putting it down and making out you know, because they put the world down. They were some kind of superior types of knowledge, people's consciousness. It's a form of control, like religion, as you've said, science, and the previous comments there. That just won't do. We've had it, because if you seriously go along with this idea of the world, you are technically what's called alienated. You feel hostile to the world. You feel the world is a trap, that it's a mechanism, it's electronic, neurological mechanisms into which you somehow got wrapped up and caught and entwined and entangled. You poor things have to put up with being a body that's falling apart, that gets cancer. You may even get the great Siberian itch, as Alan puts it. Just terrible. These mechanics, doctors, they're trying to help you out, but really they can't succeed in the end. They don't want to succeed. I don't think they ever will succeed in a great many. They give you a pill once, they give it you for life, generally, you know, the money's. Like lawyers dragging things out, the money's lining the pockets, vested interests. Who sits on the boards of these types, you know? Ah, okay, I see. Drugs and medicine, food, drugs, food and drugs. Who puts food and drugs together? So it's terrible. And these mechanics, doctors, they can't succeed. You're falling apart. It's a grim business. It's very bad, you know, to some. So if you think that way, that's the way things are, you may as well commit suicide right now, unless you say, well, I dare not, because then really in the thereafter, there may well be eternal damnation. And you identify with your children, your assets, and you think of them going on without you. They have nobody to support them. And if you do go on in this frame of mind and continue to support them, you shall merely teach them to be like we are. And they shall go on dragging it out to support their children, and they won't really enjoy it, and they'll be afraid to commit suicide, and so will their children, and they all learn the same lesson. So what is being trying to be taught here is that the basic common sense about the nature of the world that is influencing most people today, a fully automatic model, that would be simply a myth. And if you want to say that the idea of God the Father with his white beard on the golden throne is a myth, in the bad sense of the word myth, then so is this other one. It's just as fake and has just little to support it as being the true state of affairs. So that's what we need to get something really clear. The Bible is not a historical book. Fact, when it comes down to the bare bones of it, the Bible is not a historical artifact. It's the basic information before leaving Earth, and it is a story, and they have many layers, which is why I'm here today, why we're doing what we're doing, and what others have already done, and what I'm reiterating, because what we've done differently is formulated a Christian disclosure and an exodus under a trust of truce from the public civil legal person into back to a branch of the tree, and under the naked trust again, using Mosaic primarily, prerequisites, axioms and precepts. And that's the way that the book was coded in order for us to exit out of this, and for the Christian disclosure to be someday reinterpreted, and the Exodus pathway using that correction, trust, equity and international, with common law, overcoming statute, maritime admiralty. So there's a good intricacy of a journey for you to go and for you to vibrate out of, and it cannot be denied. The doors cannot be shut. You are a free man, and you are not a number, you know. You've been sweened one too many times before. It's finished. All right, I only said to blow the bloody doors off, Dave. Not to, you know, we've gone a bit far. We've unexpectedly got here through the diligence of pathways. So let's get all of this clear, why we are here. And when we reference the KJV, it's not my book. I didn't write it. I don't pay it homage. We just point out the pathways to freedom instead of crucifixion that have been encoded, and give you the chapter and verse as we're going to go on. 11 of 46. Well done. A quarter of the way through in 1 hour. I'm going to speed up as soup's on. If you don't, well, you found it in other people. Is there such thing as intelligence, love and beauty? You find it in other people. In other words, it exists in human beings. And as we said, if it is then it is in us, it is symptomatic as the scheme of things. We are symptomatic of the scheme of things, as the apples are symptomatic of the apple tree, or the rose of the rose bush. The earth is not a big rock infested with living organisms any more than your skeleton is bones infested with cells. The earth is geological, yes, we'll not argue there, but the geological entity grows people. It peoples, and our existence on the earth is a symptom of the solar system and its natural balances, universal laws, as much as the solar system is in turn a symptom of our galaxy, and our galaxy is in turn a symptom of the whole company of galaxies and universe. And godness only knows what that's in, and further on, we'll stop there if you please. But you see, when a scientist, or as a scientist, you describe the behavior of a living organism, or you try to say what a person does, it is only the way in which you can describe what a person is to describe what they do. You find out by making that description, you cannot confine yourself to what happens inside the skin. You can talk about a person or man walking unless you describe the floor, because when you walk, you don't just dangle your legs in empty space, and you move in relationship to a room. And so in order to describe what you're doing when you're walking, you have to describe extra things such as rooms and floors. I had to describe the territory. So in describing my talking at the moment, I can't describe this just as a thing in itself, because I'm actually talking to you. And so what I'm doing at the moment is not completely described unless your being here is described also as witnesses and notaries, as an audience, as your viewership in some jurisdictions. So if that is necessary, in other words, to describe my behavior, I have to describe your behavior and the behavior of the environment. It means we've really got one system of behavior. What I am involves what you are. I don't know who I am unless I know who you are, and you don't know who you are unless you know who I am. Which draws us to a brilliant segue to reference a wise rabbi who once said, if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I, and you are not you. In other words, initiates, we are not separate. We define each other. We are all backs and fronts to each other. You know, you can't, for example, have two sticks. You can't lean them together, and they stand up and they'll support each other. You can't lean one away without the other falling, or take one away without the other falling. They interdepend. And so in exactly the same way, we in our environment, and all of us, each other, are interdependent systems. We know who we are in terms of other people. We all lock together. And this is again and again a serious scientific description of how things happen. And any good scientist knows, therefore, that what you call the external world, in as much your own body, your skin doesn't separate you from the world. It is a bridge, though, which the external world flows into you, and you flow into it. And just for example, whirlpools in streams, in water, you could say that because you have a skin, you have a definite shape, you have definite form. Here, it is a flow of water, and suddenly it makes a whirlpool, and that, it goes on. The whirlpool is a definite form, but no water stays put in it. The whirlpool is in fact something that the stream, the body of water, is doing. And exactly the same way, the whole universe is doing each one of us. We are each like a whirlpool. And I see you and I recognize you again another day, just as I would recognize a whirlpool in a stream. I've seen that whirlpool before. That's the whirlpool Kevin is near so-and-so's house on the end of the river in Kent, and it's always there. So in the same way, when I meet Kevin tomorrow, I recognize Kevin as the same whirlpool he was yesterday. You're moving, the whole world is moving through you. All the cosmic rays, all the food that you're eating, and everything is just flowing right through you. When you're wiggling the same way the world is wiggling, the stream is wiggling, then you see things. The problem generally is us, the way we see things. We haven't been taught to envisage the realm and the environment, our thoughts and self, in such a way. The myths underlying our culture and underlying our common sense have not taught us to feel identical with the universe, but as only parts of it, only in confronting it as aliens, so to speak. I think we all quite are right now in need of urgently coming to feel that we are the eternal universe, each one of us. Otherwise we shall go out of our heads. We're going to commit suicide collectively, courtesy of atomic bombs and warship worship. I was discussing two of the great myths of the models of the universe, which lie in the intellectual and the psychological background of all of us. The myth of the world as a political monarchic state in which we are all here on sufferance, as subjects of God, in which we are made artifacts who do not exist in our own right. God alone in the first myth exists in his own right. and you exist as a favor, and you want to be grateful, like your parents come onto you sometimes, maybe, possibly, look at the things we've done for you, yada yada yada, all the money we've spent putting you through to education. You turned your back to be a loser, a waste man, a wretched, ungrateful child, and you're supposed to say, sorry mum, sorry dad, I really am. You know, you're definitely in the position of being on probation at some points of life here. So the idea of the royal God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, which we inherit from the political structures of the Tigris and the Euphrates cultures and from Egypt. Pharaoh Amenhotep IV is probably, as Freud suggested, the original author of Moses and the monotheism there. And certainly the Jewish law code that comes from Hammurabi in the Chaldea. These men lived in a culture where the pyramid and the ziggurat were made. A ziggurat is a Chaldean version of the pyramid, indicating a hierarchy of power, also found in South America and Peru. You know, from the boss at the top all the way down the pyramid formation, the eye in the pyramid. Exactly, we all know about that. So putting out there that Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, as Freud that was suggesting, the original Egyptian Moses monotheism references, and writing of the author of Moses monotheism. And if Genesis is the first book of Moses, you see where the comparisons across. And when I say about the Egyptian, the Ankh, which is probably the only symbol that is not on that backdrop behind me, the Ankh obviously with the loop at the top, you would take off the loop and you straighten it out, and you would devise the cross, or the Catholic Christian cross that we see all too often is just the loop straightened out to form. The fact that there's an obelisk in London, Washington, and the Vatican, countries of their own right to honour that isn't, by accident, and they took a lot of hard work to be brought there. All right. There's more Egyptian DNA in Englishman's blood going through veins at a minute than there is Anglo-Saxon Protestant, because madness, indeed. Scotia, Major, Nova, Minor Scotia, Escotia. So anyway, pyramids, eyes, power. Ziggurat, Chaldean version of the pyramid indicating hierarchy of power, also found in America and Peru, boss at the top. God in this first myth we've been discussing is the ceramic myth, and is the boss of, and the idea of God is that the universe is governed from above. You see these parallels go hand in hand with the idea that you govern your own body, and that the ego, which lies somewhere between the ears and behind the eyes and in the brain, somewhere there, is the governor of the body. And so we can't understand and assist a system of order, a system of life, which there isn't a governor. O Lord, our governor, how excellent is all thy name in all the world. But supposing, on the contrary, there could be a system which doesn't have a government and a hierarchy, what? Self-governance. That's what we're supposed to have in this society, perhaps. We are supposed to be, in some places, democratic, or even under a republic type. We're supposed to govern ourselves initially, is what I'm getting at. And yet, as I said, it's so funny that some countries can be politically, Republican, and not in the Republican Party sense, but yet religiously monarchical. And it's a strange contradiction. So what is the universe? Is it a monarchy? Is it a public? Is it a public? Is it a republic? Is it a mechanism? Is it an organism? Because you see, and that's good, that. Is it a monarchy, a republic, a mechanism, or an organism? I'd like you to say. If you see it as a mechanism, it's a mere mechanism, as in the fully automatic model, or else it's mechanism under the control of a driver or a mechanic, a potterer or a carpenter. If it's not that, it's an organism. And an organism is a thing that governs itself. It's fact. And in your body, there is no boss, as sorts. You can argue, for example, the brain is a gadget evolved by the stomach in order to serve the stomach for the purposes of getting food. Or you can argue that the stomach is a gadget evolved by the brain to feed it, keep it alive. Whose game is this? Is it the brain's or the stomach's game? Actually, they're mutual. The brain implies the stomach implies the brain, Neither of them is the boss. You know, the story about all of the limbs of the body, instead of the hands, they said, we do all our work. The feet said, we do all our work. The mouth said, we do all the chewing. And this lazy stomach, who just gets it all, doesn't do anything. He didn't do any work. So let's go on strike. And the hands refused to carry, the feet to walk, the mouth to chew, and said, now we're on strike against the stomach. And after a while, all of them found themselves getting weaker and weaker and weaker, because they didn't recognize that the stomach actually fed them energy and nutrition. So there is the possibility then that we are not in the kind of system that there are these two myths delineate, that we are not living in a world where we ourselves, in a deeper sense of self, are outside of reality, and somehow in a position that we have to bow down to it apologetically. So sorry, 1,000 apologies, and say as a great favour, please preserve us in existence. Nor are we in a system which is merely mechanical, in which we are nothing but flukes trapped in the electrical wiring of a nervous system which is fundamentally rather inefficiently arranged. What are the alternatives? We could put the alternatives in another image altogether, and we will call this not the ceramic image, not the fully automatic image, but the dramatic image, the drama of it all. Consider the world as a drama. The whole world, it be a stage. What's the basis of all drama? The basis of all stories, of all plots, of all happenings is the game of hide and seek. Who done it? You get a baby. What's the fundamental first game you'll play with your asset, your offspring, your baby? You put a book in front of your face and you may play peekaboo, hide and seek. The baby starts giggling because the baby is still close enough to the original source of energy and life. It comes from the womb, really knowing what all this is about, but it can't put it into words, as fresh as it is, and with all that stem cell oozing, what every child psychologist really wants to know is how to get a baby to talk psychological jargon and explain how it feels. The baby knows. You do this and the baby starts laughing at the game of hide and seek, because the baby is a recent incarnate of God, and the force, the life force there. The baby knows therefore that hide and seek is indeed the basic game of life. See, before, when we were children, we were taught 1, 2, 3, and we was taught ABC, but we were not sat down ever on our mother's knees and taught the game of black and white. Now that's the thing that was left out of all education, that life is not a contract between opposites, but a polarity and attraction. The difference between conflict and polarity is simply when you say about opposite things, we sometimes use the expression, these two things are poles apart. You say, for example, with someone with whom you totally disagree, I am poles apart. We saw that with Brexit. Yes, it divided humanity as sorts on this landmass, on this terra firma. But you're really saying that gives the show away. Poles, opposite ends of one magnet. You take a magnet, there's a north and a south pole. Chop off the south pole, to move it away. You've got a piece left, and that creates a new south pole. You'll never get rid of the south pole. Things may be poles apart, but they do in fact go together. You cannot have one without the other. Antithesis, synthesis, and the Hegelian dialects come into mind. That's the basic idea of polarity, north and south. So we're all bipolar. We live in a bipolar realm. What we're trying to imagine is the encounter of forces that come from absolutely opposed, realms, and they have nothing in common. When we say of two personality types that they are poles apart, we're trying to think eccentrically instead of concentrically. And so in this way, we haven't realized, bit of Pazio style soups on in there, that life and death, black and white, good and evil, being, and non-being come from the same center. They imply one another, so that you wouldn't know the one without the other. Now, we're not saying that that's bad. It's kind of fun. You are playing the game that you don't know. The self and the other go together in just the same way as the two poles of the magnet, so that when anybody in our culture may slip into the higher state of consciousness, Josh Winks, to put it in reference to the first time I ever enveloped the higher state of consciousness was in the form of a black-inch record, 12-inch vinyl, ensconced in my record collection, which was neon colours. It shouted out loud things. If anybody ever had that CD tape or vinyl, you will know how it stood out amongst the others. It was a particular striking acid tweaking house, tweaking acid house even track. So ones that play the game, and you come into this higher state of consciousness where you suddenly find it to be true, and you say, I am God. What? And you say, what? You're insane. You can't be God. God's up there. You're not God. You're just a little slave called John. And society's view upon that, when we feel that we have slipped into a state of consciousness, it's as easy to get as you can get sick. Anybody it can happen to anybody. You can slip into this state of consciousness, and when you get it, it depends on your background and your training and how you're going to interpret this. You've got the idea that God comes from popular Christianity, God as the governor, the political head of the world, and you think you're God, then you should bow down and worship me, is the kind of mentality that you're in there. And you being a member of Hindu culture, you suddenly tell your friends you're God. Instead of saying you're insane, they will say, well, congratulations, fist bump, at last you found out that you are God. Well done, strong mind. Because their idea of God is not the autocratic governor. When they make images of Shiva, say that he has 10 arms, how's anybody going to control and coordinate 10 arms? It's hard enough to use 2. If you play the organ, you've got to use your 2 feet and your 2 hands, and you play different rhythms with each member of the band. It's tricky, but actually we're all masters of this. How do you grow hair without having to think about it? Each nerve. How do you beat your heart and digest with your stomach at the same time? When you're asleep, your body looks after itself. You wake up, you're alive, you're not dead. You have mastery of many things without even being conscious of it. You don't have to think about it. So in your body, you're very omnipotent in the true sense of the word omnipotence, which is that you're able to be omnipotent. You are able to do all these things without having to think about it, since being born by the waters of mum there. When I was a child, I used to ask my mother all sorts of ridiculous questions, and my grandma and my granddad, quite a lot, as I'm sure we all did that are here on this journey, listening to me recite the great words of many. And when they get bored with us, with our questions, they'll say, there's some things that you're just not meant to know. I'll tell you when you're older. And sometimes, will we ever know? Sometimes when we go, some things God is only meant to know, is another thing. Shut up, watch TV, stop asking why. And will we ever know? When we die and when we go to heaven, God will make everything plain. So, we used to have many things said to us when we asked too many questions as inquisitive young initiates. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? You may ask God, and he will explain. God, thinking Elohim, Lord, would explain. Heavenly Father, Most High, the leaves are green because of chlorophyll. In the Hindu universe, you would say to God, how did you make the mountains? And he would say, well, I just did it. Because what you're asking me for, when you're asking me how did I make the mountains, you're asking me to describe in the medium of words how I made the mountains. And there are no words which can do this. Words cannot tell you how I made the mountains, young initiate, any more than I can drink the ocean with a fork. A fork may be useful for sticking into a piece of something and eating it, but it's not used for imbibing the ocean. It would take millions of years. So it would take millions of years. In other words, you would be bored with the description long before I got through it if I put into words for you, because I didn't create the mountains with words. Yes, well, in the beginning, there was... What was there in the beginning? There was the word. There was let it be light. And created things in the dark, if you look at it, and from the point of Hitchens. And after creating and doing things and the world being without form and Genesis and the particular beginning there, then turning on the light comes secondary to, making things in the dark. So again, not my words and nothing new under the sun, but we continue on. We can't describe. The Creator couldn't describe with words, just like you can't describe how you open and close your hand. You do this, you can do which one? Rubbing and patting and rubbing. How do you do this? Explain what's going on, the whole thought process. You couldn't do it. How you get somewhere when you're traveling, you don't remember traveling. Autopilot, you're programmed in. You think, bloody hell, it's only taking me 15 minutes to get here and I can't even remember which way I come. How many red lights did I look at? I don't know, that kind of a feeling. Generally moon day morning, when you don't want to be doing the rat race and you find yourself embellished ensconced in, and suddenly you, zombie state, have gone from home to the place of which shall not be mentioned, worship, war with the K, and you don't remember getting there. And you can't describe it. You don't even remember it. And it was just 15 minutes ago on Moon Day. So there are things we do we're not conscious of that we couldn't explain with words. Or if we did and we had to do it every time we made that action, how do you manage to be conscious? How do you beat your heart? How do you say in words and explain correctly how this is done? You can't do it. You can't put it into words because words are far too clumsy and basic and simple in some respects. But yet we manage to do things expertly for as long as we're able to do it. We're playing the game, and the game runs like this. The only thing you really know is what you can put into words. Well, no. Have a think about that. Suppose I love somebody, you love somebody, and somebody said to me, you really love her. How would you prove this? Your intentions, your business, your interest with that girl to make your partner, a partnership. Now I want you to prove it before I give you my daughter's hand in holy matrimony, wedlock and marriage. So say you might write some poetry. You might. Tell us how much you love her, and then we will believe you. So if you're an artist, it may be easy for you to put this into words and convince everybody you've written the most ecstatic love letter ever written. And they say, okay, we'll admit it. You really do love her. Quite masterpiece, But supposing you're not very articulate, are we going to tell you you don't know love? You don't know her? You're not good enough? Surely not. You don't have to be Eloise and Abelard to be in love. So the whole game, Romeo and Juliet. If what, who? So again, someone else. The whole game that our culture is playing, that is nothing. Is that nothing really happens unless it's big news, unless it's in the newspaper, unless somebody captures it, some kind of a scandal. Somebody captures it on a tape recorder. Children, begin to feel they don't exist authentically unless they get their names in the papers. The fastest way of getting famous and your name in the papers to commit a crime. Then you'll be photographed. I'm not advocating that, just generally what we see. You'll appear in court, everybody notices you. Rappers, for instance, coming out of prison, Plan B, Akon, two of the ones, fresh out of prison. Plan B, had a Plan B. Akon was locked up and they let him out. That's how it goes, how publicity, no such thing as bad publicity. In a way, it really happened if it was recorded. In other words, if you shout and in the distance it doesn't come back as an echo, then it didn't happen. What? Well, that's really bad logic, to be fair. It's true. It's good fun with echoes. We all like singing in the bathtub, but and resonance. But when we play a musical instrument like a cello, a violin, a guitar, it has a sounding box because there is resonance to the sound. And in the same way, the cortex of the human brain enables us when we are happy to know that we are happy, and that has a certain vibrational resonance. About 432 is what we've come to understand. 4 plus 3, okay, not hard, quickly, come on now. 7 plus 2, 7 and 2, 9. Again, divinity. Massive expansion and segue point there as the ink at the end of the patterns when you smash it at the wall, looking at the universe expanding. And once that expansion, boom, we're at the part of the boom, as the boom has happened, boom, spell BOOM, we're kind of at the the boom. It's been going a while, and resonance, happiness, negativity, getting on your knees to pray, being in a lower non-432 vibratory, agitated, anxious, so again, resonance, vibration, feeling. I get the feeling that something good's going to happen. You feel it. Why? Because you're at the correct, not the all spiky and agitated. You're kind of gooey. When we say prickly goo and gooey prickles, bringing it back to loop into that, you're no longer at the agitated spiky, you're at the fuzziness of the gooey love. You all melting in love. You see the correlations are all quite insane in a way, but looking at it from within as one whole, things obviously have sense brought to them. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. We're not doing the okey cokey. If you're happy and you don't know you're happy, then I'm sorry, there's nobody home. Okay. If you're angry all the time and you're always angry, there's key roots to that. And if you're always like what we see sometimes in America. Have a nice day, overly happy, loving, and such. That may, as an Englishman, we're quite negative, not very positive. It grinds on us, too much positivity and love. If you notice that, I think Russell Kane did an excerpt in a video about someone in the audience. He asked if there was anybody not British, and an Australian says woo, and his audience is quiet. But he asked that same question in America, and when somebody went woo of Australian, non-American, Australian or American audience went bizarrely insane positive. Wow, you're a traveler and you're here in America, and how do you love it? And it's the mentalism that we have as cultures, and resonance to happiness, and how we accept, even for me, compliments, gratitude, and the way that we've got to look at how we resonate, and why we have so much screw face, negativity, anger, vexation. Happiness, being happy and not knowing it, being too happy. Nobody's happy all the time. It's not normal, so we need to look at these ways we are. The whole problem for us several thousand years ago, human beings evolved a system of self-consciousness, and they begin to know that they know. And there was a young man who said, though it seems that I know, what I would like to see is the eye that knows me, when I know that I know that I know. So there was a young man who said, though it seems that I know, that I would like to see is the eye that knows me, when I know that I know that I know. That is the human problem. We know that we know, and so came a point in our evolution when we didn't guide life just by the gut instincts anymore. We had to think about it, and had to purposely arrange and discipline and push our lives around in accordance with foresight and words and systems and symbols, accountancy, calculation, and so on. Like I said about the net, the beginning of calculus. And we worry. And once you start to think about things, you worry as to whether or not you thought enough about those things. Did you really take all the details into account and consideration? Was every fact properly reviewed? And the more you think about it, the more you may realize that you really couldn't take everything into consideration practically, physically, literally, because all the variables in any human decision are in somewhat, are incalculable. So you get anxiety. And this this is the price you pay for knowing that you know, for being able to think about, to feel. And so we get in a funny position. Do you see that this is simultaneously an advantage and also a terrible disadvantage? What has happened here is that by having certain kind of a consciousness, by being self-aware, a certain kind of reflective consciousness of being aware, being able to represent what goes on fundamentally in terms of a system of symbols, such as words, such as numbers. You put it as it were two lives together at once, one representing the other, symbols representing the reality, the money representing the wealth. And if you don't realize that the symbol is really secondary, it doesn't have the same value. People go to the supermarkets and they get the goodies, and they drive through, and the cashier, the clerk, gives you a receipt, charges you, and you pay the pounds and the monies. Everybody, some of us feel depressed. We give away so many pounds or dollars worth of paper, and we've got some goodies in a car. You don't think about what's actually happened. You've lost a bit of paper. You've got energy, nutrition, wealth in the shopping cart. You've parted with the paper, because paper in our system becomes more valuable than wealth. It represents power, potentiality. Where is the wealth that goes? It's unnecessarily. You've got to eat. Then if you awaken from this illusion and you understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, or should I say death in fact implies life, you can feel yourself not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on probation. When I say probation is closing, and I talk about probation, and I've referenced probation. You're in a court 24/7. So when we say probation, not probation for the will you get the job, will you be given by the universe the position of trust, probation, not as something that has arrived here by fluke either. And in the chaos, in the cause and effect, you can begin to start to feel and experience your own existence is absolutely fundamental as what you are basically, deep down, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself. To say in Hindu mythology, they say the world is the drama of God. God is not something in Hindu mythology with a white beard that sits on the throne and has its royal prerogative. God in Indian mythology is the self. And let me get this right, because this is a new word. A sachi, and then ananda, which means sa, that which is, sa. Chi, that which is consciousness, and that which is ananda is bliss. Sachi ananda. Not something I often come across, or is even easy for me to say. And in other words, that what exists, reality itself, is gorgeous. It's the plenum, the fullness of total joy. While we look at all those stars, if you look out in the sky, you will see a firework display like you may see on the 5th of November or indeed the 4th of July. It's a great occasion. Life is a great occasion for celebration. The universe is a celebration. It is a fireworks show to celebrate that existence is a we experience. And then, however, there's no point in just sustaining bliss and being here for a good time. Let's suppose, you were able to every night dream a dream that you wanted to dream, and you could have the power within one night to dream 75 years of time, any length of time you wanted to have. You would naturally, as you began on this adventure, dreams, you would dream and you would fulfill all your wishes. You would have every kind of pleasure you could conceive. And after several nights of 75 years of total pleasure each, you would maybe perhaps look at saying, that was great, but now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under control, where, something is going to happen unexpectedly to me that I don't know what it's going to be. You would do that, and you would come out and say, wow, that was a close shave, wasn't it? And then you would get more and more adventurous. You would make further and further far out gambles, possibly, as it's a dream and it's just fun, a bit like watching a play. You would dream, and finally, perhaps you would dream where you are now. You would dream the dream of living the life that you are actually living today. That would be within the infinite multiplicity of choices that you would have of playing that you are not God. Because the whole nature of the Godhead, according to this idea, is to play that he is not. Remember, hide and seek. When we talk about in the reflection of God, God is no respecter of person. In the creation of God, God granter of dominion, Lord God, Elohim. There is a separation and there is a premise and an encoding of consciousness and self, and the realization of. So Godhead, hidden within, looking within, inwardly project, outwardly attract, law of attraction, power of intent, holy court type, judgment, scales and symbols, all through is very relevant. I have some spare ones of these. You can get them yourself from the internet. We'll talk about the backdrops another time. So the Godhead, you are pretending you are not God. So the first thing that you say to yourself is, or he says to himself, is man get lost because he will give himself away. The nature of love is self-abandonment, not clinging to oneself, throwing yourself out there. As in, for example, in basketball, you're always getting rid of the ball, of the hot potato. Give it somebody else. You say to the other team player, have the ball. In politics, you pass on the responsibility, political hot potato, and the game keeps moving. That is the nature of life. So then in this ideal, everybody is fundamentally the ultimate reality, not God in a politically kingly sense, but God in the sense of being the self that deep down, basic, whatever there is, and you're all that, respectively. Only you're pretending that you're not. We forget that we're not. The species with amnesia. And it's perfectly okay to pretend that you're not. To be absolutely convinced. This is going away from Hitchens and more into Watts, but taking little bits from others and making it so we could find a possible pathway, like we have done with public legal person, into private lawful man. So we continue on. Page 20 of 46. Man's nearly halfway through. 1 hour 49. Let's go to the room, because that's a good segue. Because we're going to go into the theatre and we're going to put on the persona and we're going to talk about the mask. All right. All right, so you can think what you want, yeah. This is all a discovery. I'm not here to tell you anything or to make you believe or to judge you or to question anything or to cause. I'm giving you a presentation and a story from the scholars and the intellects, such as, you know what thought did, don't you? Yeah, he followed a muck cart, thought it was a wedding. Let me go back up to see what my enlightened initiates of this Friday, the 2nd of April, are in fact talking about. Let me see the Fibonacci code of chat, of randomness, excitement, interaction, and truly the billiards theory of atoms banging around on a billiards table, as we mentioned earlier. I love it. I love it all. I love this kind of chat. All right then, Claire. I got to. I am fingers, one love. It also covers up the infiltration and killing of African tribes. Bible, very, very powerful comment there. Taken out of context, but relevant and Bosch, new scribe, and articulate chirp, chomping. If you cross-reference the Bible, put it on paper like a graph, it creates a dome. Yeah, it was meant to be. The Greeks and their legacy of piracy. One love. I'm liking your commentary. Thank you. I just woke up, poured some chaga coffee and found myself here. Sister Lisa, love and light. Balloon, thank you. Salim, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the house of fun. This is massive. This is big. Like I say, consider trying to download this, make an MP3 of it, put it onto some kind of playlist. Listen to this when you're out in the open as a audio track and looking, meditating, nighttime at the moon, daytime at the sun. Reference, articulate, chat, take the positions of, and we're about halfway through. Just looking to say, Penal, Fibonacci code, golden ratio, phi, it applies to everything, give form to creation, God's signature. Yes, I would furthermore add to that you found the mathematics. Mathematics is the science of nature. Man didn't create maths, man didn't find maths, man knows maths was applied in the fundamental aspect of reality before man. Man came to know of maths, didn't make it, kind of found it, then discovered it was there. And when we look at maths don't lie. That's why I like numbers over words. That's why we go into the numbers and the ratio, the phi, the Fibonacci. Fibonacci coming from India and not from Fibonacci. Before Fibonacci, there was Fibonacci. What? India. Again, see Praveen Mohan and his channel. He's brought that out. Boom. Again, like the Renaissance in Egypt, things are just... we are linking on, and the baton race is getting so there's not much of a gap between the next one with the baton. Before there was 10 miles to run before we got to pass the baton. Now we're taking a couple of steps and passing the baton. Soon it's just going to be one continuous baton pass. There's going to be no steps to be taken. Top comment there. I am fingers. My question is always, if the Greeks were so spiritually enlightened and following truth, why did they not give Egypt back to the Egyptians after beating the Persians? Warship, monarchy, control, gods, so godlike concepts and monarchy, Vatican. So we've got bankers, we've got things mixing together, Jesuits, faith in itself, the Crusades, convert to Christianity, die by the sword. Look what we had with Islam, Islamists and Judaism and Christianity all coming out, which will form Christianity, Judaism and Islam then being formed, and the pathways. Europe with the what are they called now? The evangelist going that way, into Europe, the Catholicism and the Catholics going this way, how that formulated, and the different massive things. You could say it's easy to think, but religion, money, power, wealth, greed, not logic, not sense. Alexandria, stories of who was studying there, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Egyptians, possibly Rastafaris, possibly Buddha, Zen type, houses together, respectful, all one. Then something had to come and shatter, like the three-pronged, like horns, teeth. So sad. sad times of which we were so close to going one way when something happened and we went down, much like the story of getting kicked out, biting the apple, being made in lesser form, having to feel guilty, suffering, war, pestilence. I know, I've often wondered the same thought. I am fingers. Romans, the pesky Romans, the Club of Rome. I'd recommend John Levi. His channel is really interesting. Thank you, Jay. We will look at that. You may put links in if you're blue, and we'll follow that. Claire says we've got 3 brains. 3. We would generally have that, yes. So the way that the outer, the inner, and the cortex, and then a left and a right. The division of the one that centers in the middle is called what? The 1-3 brain that borders the 2 hemispheres. I often think of that as the Istanbul of the continents that borders 1 continent on 2 land masses. Again, coming on, I've got to get through this document, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a, I love your chat. I do. What you think, how you think, what you say, you respect and you love. Junk consciousness, junk DNA from Lisa. Polarity is the same light versus dark. You can't shine light into darkness. You can shine light into darkness, but you can't have a torch of dark to take away the light. Mark Pazio. Bosh. Indeedy, Claire. You can light up a dark room, but you can't darken a light room. Bosh. It runs into the corners. And then when the light goes out, it comes from the corners back into the very centre. And when you put the light on, it escapes to the very corners again. I like that little bit. I've seen that on a film once. Love energy transference. The heart is a vibrational generator. It creates its own frequency. Came on 8:30. Says it loud. Says it proud. Live, love, learn, leave. I am fingers. LLLL. The 4 L's. You don't have to be clever to be kind. No, you do not. Love is before learn. Oh, look at you go. All right, I've got that. You're on to maths and OMS. We continue on. The theatre is where we're going to head to now. The green room. It's perfectly okay to pretend you're not, to be absolutely convinced, because this is the whole notion of drama. When you come into the theatre and there is a proscenium arch on the stage and down below is the audience and everybody assumes their seats in the theatre, going to see a comedy, a tragedy, a thriller, whatever it is, and they know as they come in, as they pay their admissions, that what is going to happen on the stage is not for real. The actors have a conspiracy against this because they're going to try and persuade the audience that what is happening out on the stage is indeed for real. They want to get everybody sitting on the edge of their seats, and they want to get you terrified, crying or laughing, absolutely captivated by the drama. And if a skillful human actor can take in an audience and make people cry, then think what the cosmic consciousness can in fact do. When he himself when he can take himself in completely, he can play so much for real if he really believes. Okay, sitting in a room, you think you're really there. Why? You persuade yourself that way. You acted it so damn well. You know this is the real world, but in fact you may be playing it. The audience and the actor is one. Behind the stage there is a green room, off scene, obscene, where the actors take off their masks. You know that word, person, it means mask. The persona mask worn by actors found when in Greco-Roman drama, because it has the megaphone, you know, the mouth, a bit like Pingu, wap wap, and his dad would come along and go wap wap, and he'd make like that trumpet, the same type effect there, the megaphone type mouth. That was Pingu, by the way, if you didn't, yeah, blast off, which throws out the sound into open air. Theatre, so pair through sonar. All right, that's kind of basically what that sound comes through, pair through sonar, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Beats, Sonic sonar, supersonic sonar radar of Batfing. My wings, my equity wings are like a shield of steel. Your public civil common law cannot touch me. He sometimes used to send out his supersonic sonar radar, sonar. So pair through sonar, through what the sound comes through. That is the mask for the actor, how to be a real person, how to be, as we've come to teach, a genuine fake. The mask, so dramatist personae. At the beginning of the play, there is a list of masks that the actors will wear. And so in the course of forgetting this, life is a drama. The word for the role, the word for the mask has come to mean to us, as we've found person, and what a person, what an actor, a title, a role. The whole world is a stage. Reality is an illusion. The question, what is the question? The world is a stage. The works of Shakespeare, Latin inclusion, foreign language with legalese, church and the law in the courthouse, the mixing over, the Protestant layout, the all black, and the finding of in sui juris propria persona. You've got to pick up your proper person. Peter Piper picks a pickle pepper. The pickle pepper Peter Piper picks was in propria persona. Incidentally, the word parson is derived from the word person. Parson, the parson's nose, the person of the village, personage, barratry, person around town, the person, per, each, son, each one. We go into this, we strip it down, we look at the origin, the etymological root, references, the Oxford editions, definition. We looked at it all, and we speak of, what we speak of for the avoidances of doubt. And so there is no confusion. Oxford English, definitions here today, but in the legal Black's Law Dictionary, as we've found, birth, the inclusion, the definition of birth includes stillbirth. What? Hang on a minute. Birth includes stillbirth. How does that so? Inclusio alterius and what? Stop it now. When did the world go upside down? And God is no respecter of persons. Let's start again. And welcome to our world. This is the drama of life. I'm trying to get your mind to conceptualize, like Alan and the other speakers and names referenced that will be at the end as well, are trying to get you to do here about the drama of life. I'm not here to sell this idea to you in the sense of converting it to you. I'm here as a servant of higher self, and I'm here to do a duty and a job. I want you to play with that idea. I want you to think of its possibilities. All right, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm putting it forward. I'm letting the seed be planted as a possibility of life for you to consciously think about, to meditate on. At times you can take a subject and you can meditate on the subject of, and at times you can make it blank and you can just let what comes to you come to you and go on the journey of meditation. The latter is more favorable to me. But sometimes you do need to have that, or is it that one? The thinker, whichever one it is. So then this means that you are, hang on. If I want you to play with it, I'm not trying to prove it. I'm just putting it forward as a possibility of life to think about. So then this means that you are not victims of a scheme of things, of a mechanical world, of an autocratic God. The life you are living is what you have put yourself in. Only you don't admit it because you want to play the game that is happening to you. Now the words, I got mixed up in this world, it's all my parents' fault. I didn't choose to come here. I had a father, and he fancied my mum. He got horny, and as a result, I got born. I blame him for it. Suppose we admit that really we all wanted to be born, that we wanted to be incarnate, and that you was the gleam in your father's eye. When he approached our mums, sorry to put it this way, but it's got to be one way or the other. Mum may have approached dad, and you could have been the glint in mum's eye when you was that egg shouting out to get fertilized. Either or, that was us. We was that want, the wanting, the yearning, and we deliberately got involved in this bedroom dance, all right, and that is the way, instead of getting ourselves into an awful mess, getting born, even with syphilis, even with the great Siberian itch and tuberculosis, and ending up in a Nazi concentration camp. Nevertheless, that was the game in which a very far out play. It was a kind of cosmic masochism, but we did it, and that was the optimum game rule of life. If you play on the supposition that you are a helpless little puppet that got involved, or you play on the supposition that it's a frightful, serious risk, and we ought to really ought to be doing something about it, that's, wrong. It's a laugh. It's no point in going on unless we make the assumption that the situation of life is optimal, and that we really are all in a state of a total bliss and delight. But we're going to pretend we're not. And we're not okay just for kicks. You play non-bliss, fear, anxiety, misery, heartache. In order to, experience bliss, you go as far out as non-bliss as you can go. And when you wake up, You know, it'll be great. You know, when we pass on, we'll know happiness. We'll suffer in misery now and heartache, and when we die, it will be lovely. You know, you can slam yourself on the head with a hammer. It's so nice when you stop doing that, and it makes you realise, you know, how great things are when you forget that's the way it is. And that's like black and white. You don't know black unless you know white. You do not know white unless you know black. Simply fundamental. So then here's the drama, the metaphysics. Let us be perfectly frank. You are that. There is a central self. You could call it God. You could call it anything you like. And it's all of us. It's playing all the parts of all the beings whatsoever, everywhere and anywhere. And it's playing the game of hide and seek with itself. Okay, so you are the central self. You can call it God. You can call it anything. You and all of us are playing the parts of all beings whatsoever, everywhere and anywhere. And it's playing the game of hide and seek within itself. It gets lost. It gets involved in the far out adventures. But in the end, consciousness, life, always wakes up and comes back to itself. And when you're ready to wake up, you're ready to wake up, and if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending. That's just like the poor little me aspect. And since you're all here and you're watching this and you're sharing, giving it thumbs up, contributing and chatting, you are in the sort of inquiry stage and listening to this solid lecture. I assume that you are all in, if not already, in the process of becoming awake, which we call conscionable, being conscionable, not unconscionable to the sin, the alleged sin that is purported to be us just by here being. So, or else you're teasing yourself with some kind of flirtation with waking up, but you're not ready, you're not serious. You know, maybe you're not serious, but you're sincere, that you're ready to wake up, so or become conscionable. And when you are ready, you will find, you know, you will meet a character, a guru, a thought leader. Hindus say this word, the teacher, the awakener. And what is the function of a guru, a teacher, an awakener? And they are the one who look you in the eye, or you hit you, you know, sonically with the phonics, and you know, say, come off it. I know who you are, scribes. I know who each one of you are, even though we've never met. You come to the guru and you say, oh, guru, teacher, master, sir, thought leader, David, Mark, Kevin, somebody, I have a problem. I'm not happy and I want to get one up on the universe. I want to become enlightened into the ways of natural universal law. I want spiritual wisdom, you know. And you look at the guru will look at you and they will say, I know who you are. I know who you is. Sri Ramana Maharishi, the great Hindu sage of modern times. People used to come to him and say, Master, who was I in my last incarnation? As if that mattered. And he would say, who is asking me the question? He would look at you and say, you're looking at me, looking out, and you're unaware of what's behind your eyes. Go back in and find out whom you are, where the question comes from, and why you ask that. If you come to my door and you say, hello, I'm so-and-so, I will laugh and say, haha, what a funny way God has come on to me today. Image created in, you know, in each other of the Lord. There are all sorts of tricks and games that the gurus can play. They say to you, we're going to really put you through the mill. The reason that they do that is simply that you won't wake up until you feel that you've paid the price for it, paying attention, gaining knowledge and wisdom. In other words, the sense of guilt one may have, or the sense of anxiety, is simply the way one experiences keeping the game of disguise going on. Supposingly you say, I feel guilty. Christianity makes you feel guilty for existing. Fact, it's written, and so it is. But somehow the very fact that you exist is an affront, that you are in fact a fallen. I am in fact an affront, an falling human being. You can remember some of you going to church and the services of the church on Good Friday. All right, what happened on Good Friday? They gave us each a coloured postcard with Jesus crucified on it, and it said underneath a message, this have I done for thee, what doest thou for me? And you would feel real awful. You would feel bad. You would, you know, nail that man to the cross. You would eat meat. You would crucify Christ. You kill the bull. After all, you depend on it. You know, Mithra, we've found, is the same mystery, talking about Easter and connotations and religious copycats and hijackings of pagan and different types of religions that Christianity and Catholicism has adopted. We get that, hence why I'm here on Good Friday with a certain chat on a serpent on a certain topic, for you to you'll need to watch this a couple of times, and you will need to probably make that MP3 and enjoy me phonically via the sonics of the ears, whilst letting me repeat, rewind, not fade away. When SPL say rewind selector, I'm going to say pro selector rewind. All right, so that's each way, each one for all. Watching, making notes, rewinding, and being scared by Christianity as children, blood, drinking the blood of Christ, eating the body of Christ, going to midnight mass for the kicks with grandma because you could, and it was late and it was fun, not so much to celebrate the birth and real terms of Christianity as such as a youth, and being scared a little bit, and your grandma giving you a slap because you were bringing shame upon the family, asking too many questions at that point, really was me. And so again, scared was true for children to feel, showing pictures of nailed up, and with the here, this I done for thee, what doest thou for me? It puts it into you, doesn't it? Just so in all mysteries, when you're going to be initiated, there generally is somebody saying, don't you come in here, you've got to fulfill this requirement and this requirement and this requirement and this requirement, a bit like prayer. You can't just connect directly to God. You can't just go straight to the source. What you have to do, you have to go down the road, you have to go see the parishioner, go meet the whatever it is, the priest of sorts, go see the parson, and beg and go in, and such as times have passed where you've seen where they go in and they do many things there to get access to. Your access is direct, your access is 24/7, your access is now or wherever you choose it to be. Initiated, when you're going to be initiates and you're going to get initiated, to be fair, to introduce you to yourself and to learn new paradigms, real prayer, real fabric, fundamental causality of consciousness, love, and etc. You are being initiated, which is why the word initiates is used, not Christian, not scholar, not ambassador, not diplomat, but initiations of welcoming, which is the universe being surprised by itself and waking up and realizing it played the game and it's just realized again, but each time it plays it, it forgets. So you must not, don't you dare come in here. How dare you dirty this temple, this basilica? Well, you are a basilica. Your estate is the original temple and basilica. And in all mysteries, there is this requirement, then you will get let in and you really get put through the mill. But why is that? Because you're saying to yourself, I won't wake up until I feel I deserve it. Believe me, some of you, I've met you. I won't wake up until I've made it difficult enough for me in order to wake up. So I invent for myself an elaborate system of delaying myself of the waking up. I put myself through this test and that test, and when I feel it's been sufficiently arduous, then I may at least admit to myself who I really am, and draw aside the veil and release, the mask itself, the persona. Out goes the public legal person, in comes the private lawful, sentient, connected to source, authentic being, human, whichever way you want to put it. You are that you are, which is the name of God. And then it comes to, after that, it's rather funny, all that there is to do when you have that moment in Zen. They say that you obtain a satori. Nothing then is left in you at that moment but to have a good laugh at yourself, or a tut. Depends how old you are. Youth, maybe laugh. When you get to middle age and on the one of them. Naturally, all masters, Zen masters, yoga masters, every kind of master puts up a barrier and says to you, he simply plays your own game. When we say anybody who goes to a psychiatrist, they really ought to have their head examined, because when you go to a psychiatrist, a master, a Zen master, etc., somewhere when you're looking externally, you define yourself as somebody who ought to have his head examined, the therapist, the rapist. In the same way as a Zen master would say, anybody who studies Zen or comes to a Zen master, master, there's no R in master, there ought to be given 30 blows with a stick, because he was stupid enough to pose the question that he had a problem. You have the problem. You put yourself in the situation. some good kung fu films I could reference there. The 36th Chamber of Shaolin. Anybody seen that? Return to the 36th Chamber of Shaolin. Now that iconic film in itself, the early 80s, late 70s, too far back, long time, but just make a note, mental note. The 36th Chamber of Shaolin, about a man that accidentally ends up in a Buddhist temple and starts learning the ways. He begs to be left there, even though he shouldn't be there. He stumbles upon it and what he gets taught and how he proceeds in the 36th Chamber of Shaolin. Golden Child, I'll let that slip, similar vein, but brilliant. And please, it's not the most sophisticated of films. It's basic, but it's humorous, it's out of the bubble, and it's along those lines. So you have the problem, you fix the problem. The same as when we say, if man makes the problem, why'd you pray to somewhere outside like God and Jesus and Yahweh, Muhammad, Allah, peace be upon him, etc., to fix it? When man's made the problem, it will be man that fixes it. So you have the problem, you put yourself in the situation. Do you define yourself as a victim of the world, or do you define yourself as the world? You can define yourself, and if you identify with what you call a voluntary system of the nerves and say that that's you, and you really are, a limited amount of total performance, what you do voluntarily, then you've defined yourself as the victim in the game. And so you were able to feel that life was a trap, something else, whether it was God or whether it was fate or whether it was the big mechanism, the system imposed on you. And you can say, poor little me. And you can do equally well with, as much does justification, define yourself, not only as what you do voluntary, but what you do involuntary. That's you too. Do you beat your heart, or don't you? Or does it just happen involuntary? And if you define yourself as the works, then nobody is imposing on you. You're not a victim, you are doing it. You can't explain how you do it in words because words are too clumsy. It would take too long to say. You'd frantically get bored with it. But actually, then you could say with gusto, I am responsible for this life, whether comedy or tragedy. I did it. And it seems to me that this is a basis for behaviour and actually for going on, which is more fundamentally joyous, profitable, and indeed greater. I'm just checking. All right, continuing on. Wow, this is hard work. Then defining ourselves as miserable victims or sinners or what have you. The alternative myth to the ceramic and fully automatic model of the universe is called dramaticness. The idea as life as we experience it is a big act, and that behind this big act is the player, and the player, or the self as it's called in Hindu philosophy, the Atman. You are playing hide and seek, since this is the essential game that's going on. It's the game of games, the basis of all games, hide and seek. And since you're playing hide and seek, you are deliberately, although you will never admit this, or you won't admit it, you are deliberately forgetting who you are, species with amnesia, and we want to do that. And you are deliberately forgetting whom you really are, and the knowledge that your essential self is the foundation of the universe, the ground of being, and what the Germans called a Hintergedanke. Hintergedanke. The Germans call it a Hintergedanke. Only Alan Watts can say it. A Hintergedanke. All right, and a Hintergedanke is a thought way back in your mind where there's somewhere something deep down and you will never admit. So in a way then, in order to bring this to the front, in order to know that this is the case, you have to be kitted out of your game, taken out of your comfort zone. The problem with this is that we identify in our experience a differentiation between what we do and what happens to us. We have a certain number of actions that we define as voluntary. We feel in control of those, and then over against that, there are those feelings and actions that are involuntary. But the dividing line between these two is very arbitrary, because for one example, when you move your hand, you feel that. You decide whether to open or close it. You ask yourself, how do you decide? When you decide to open your hand, do you first decide? No, you don't. You just decide. And how do you do that? It's a thought. It's instant. And it's a neurological, electronic, pathway connection that happens there. It's voluntary, or is it involuntary? You could consider the same of breathing. You can feel you breathe deliberately, quietly, and you can control your breath. But when you do, you don't think about it. It goes on. Is it voluntary? It's involuntary and voluntary. As when you're asleep, it is involuntary. So we come to have a very arbitrary definition of self. That much of my activity, which I feel I do, and that then doesn't include breathing most of the time. It doesn't include the heartbeats. It doesn't include the activity of glands. It doesn't include digestion. It doesn't include how you shape your bones, circulate your blood. Do you or do you not do these things? Now, if you get with yourself and you find out that you are all of yourself, a very strange thing happens. You'll find that your body knows that you are one with the universe. And in other words, the so-called involuntary circulation of your blood, that is one continuous process, the stars shining. If you find out it is in fact you who circulates your blood, you will at the same moment find out that it is you shining the stars, the sun, because your physical organism is one continuous process with everything else that is going on. Okay, it's a product of the earth peoples and universes, the solar systems, and products of. So just as the waves are continuous with the ocean, your body is continuous waves, continuous connection, making a DNA connection through radio transference of radio waves 432, and continuous with the energy system, magneto-electro of the cosmos. It's all you, it's reflection on, and you're playing the game that you're only this little bit of it. As I tried to explain there, in physical reality, there are no such things as separate events. Coincidence is a word made up. There are coincidences. You've got a path. It's a straight and narrow path, and you should be walking on that straight and narrow path. But at times you zigzag off it and you come back to it. And at those times when you cross the path on them, zigzags, those crossings of the paths going back on it are what we call coincidences. When you go back in over time, you stop zigzagging as much, and your zigzags become less, and you become more of a squiggle down to an indefinite squiggle down to a straight fine line, much like a Tesla tower. And the way the signal speeds up, the radio frequency, copper round magnet, has got a proven effect to create magnetic electrofields, and we can send and speed up and get the signal to go thinner and thinner, faster and faster as it gets kinetic potential, terminal velocity. When something falls, there is a maximum limit. The scalar waves that we've seen on pyramids and in natural formations of pyramids, energy, sun, electromagneto. So it goes deep, and there are ways of looking at this and measuring it. And the waves, continuous ocean waves, skies, consciousness, seas of potentiality, frequencies and resonance. There are many types in the emptiness of rhythms and spaces and harmonics and frequencies for us all to get, in tune with. So you pretend you're just a separate, isolated bit of reality. And there are in physical reality no such things as physical separate events. And when we work towards a definition of omnipotence is not knowing how everything is done. It's just doing it, like the word claircognizance. And you don't have to translate it into a language. And you know what is truth, you know what is lie, you can smell it, you can feel it. So supposing when you wake up in the morning, you have to switch on your brain, and you have to think and do that as a deliberate process, waking up all the circuits that you need for active life during the day. Why, you would never get it done, because you have to do all those things at once. How can a centipede control 100 legs at once? Vishnu, 10 arms. Shiva, 10 arms, because you don't have to think about it in the same way. You are unconsciously performing all the various activities of your organism, only unconsciously. That isn't the greatest of words. Sounds sort of dead. Super consciously, not supernatural. Super consciously would be better. Give it a plus rather than a minus, because what consciousness is simply a specialized form of awareness. When you look around the room, you are conscious as much as you can notice, and you see an enormous amount of things which you don't consciously notice. For example, when I mentioned about traveling from work, from home to work, the place that shall not be mentioned, you might not always remember. When you look at things and you're asked to recite them as of being a speaker at a meeting, and what did that man look like, what did that girl look like, I don't know, but I've seen what the man looked like. I saw for hours. I've looked at them many times. I looked at the woman many times that asked a lot of questions, but now what was she wearing, I may not know, although I've seen, because I didn't attend and notice and make a point. I was aware. And perhaps if I could, under hypnosis, be asked this question, where would I get my conscious, where I get my conscious tension out of the way through being in the hypnotic state, I would recall what the man or the woman dress, attire they was wearing. So just then, in the same way, you don't focus your attention on how you make your thyroid gland function, so in the same way you don't have the attention focused on how you shine the sun and the stars. Let me connect this with the problem of birth and death, which puzzles people enormously, of course. In order to understand what the self is, you have to remember that it doesn't need to remember anything. Okay, and you don't need to know how you work your thyroid gland. So when you die, you're not going to have to put up with everlasting non-existence, because that's not an experience. A lot of people seem to think and are afraid that when they die, they're going to be locked up in a darker room forever, or a dark room, a period of nothingness, and undergo that for eternity. One of the most interesting things in the world is yoga. This is controversial, but this is a way of realization. Try and imagine what it would be like to go to sleep and never wake up. Think about that. Children have thought about it. You maybe already had this thought yourself. It's one of life's great wonders, what it would be like to go to sleep and to never wake up. And if you think long enough about that, something will indeed happen to you. You will find out, among other things, that it will pose the next question to you. What was it like to wake up after never going to sleep? That was when you were born, like none of us. You see, you can't have an experience of nothing. Nature abhors a vacuum. So after you've, the only thing that can happen is the same experience, or the same sort of experience as when you were born. In other words, we all know very well that after people die, people are born. And they're all us, they're all you. You can only experience it, though, one at a time. Everybody is I. You all know. You are you. And wherever so beings exist throughout all galaxies, it doesn't make any difference. You are all of them, and they come into being. That's you coming into being. Existence, life, man, consciousness, alien, or indigenous. Only you don't have to remember the past, in the same way you don't have to think about how you work your thyroid gland or whatever else it is in your organism. You don't have to know how to shine the sun. You just do it like you breathe. It doesn't really astonish you that you are this fantastically complex, thing, organism, being, and that you're doing all of this, and you did not have any education or training lessons in how to do it, and you never learned. You are this miracle. Well, the point is, from a strictly scientific standpoint, this organism is a continuous energy with everything else that is going on. And if I am my foot, I am the sun. Only we've got this little partial view. We've got the idea that no, I am just something in this body, the ego. That is a joke. The ego is nothing other than the focus of conscious attention. It's like the radar on a ship. The radar on a ship is indeed a troubleshooter. Is there anything in the way? It's out there, it's on the lookout. It's conscious attention is a design function of the brain to scan the environment, much like radar scans and notes for any possible troublemaking changes and dangers. But if you identify yourself with the troubleshooter, then naturally you then end up and define yourself as being in a perpetual state of anxiety. We have a brain loop, which is cognitive dissonance, and at the moment we cease to identify with the egos and cognitive dissonance and become aware that we are the whole organism, you come to realize the first point of realization is harmonious. How harmonious it all is, because your organism is a miracle of harmony. All this thing being functioning together, all those corpuscles and creatures that are fighting each other in the bloodstream and eating each other up as if they were, if they weren't doing so, you wouldn't be healthy. So what is discord at one level of your being is harmony at a higher level. You begin to realize, you begin to be aware that these discords of your life are discords of people's lives, are which are a fight at one level, and at a higher level of the universe are healthier, harmonious chords of the symphony of the orchestra of life. So under a microscope, the blood stream looks like chaos, but from the outset external position of looking at man, from the outside, from a good 10 meters away, you see a shape, an organism and skin encasing it, and it's calm and still, but going into it, it looks like a discord. So
they're the same thing but at different perspectives, you suddenly realize, that everything that you are and do is at a level is magnificent and is free of any blemish, as the patterns in waves, as the markings in marble, the way a cat moves, and that this world is really okay and it can't be anything else, because otherwise it could not exist. The reality underneath physical existence, or which reality is physical existence, because in my philosophy there's no difference between the physical and the spiritual. They are absolutely out of date categories. It's all process. It isn't stuff. On the one hand, in form, on the other, it is pattern. In one hand, there is form, and on the other hand, there is pattern. Life is pattern. It's a dance of energy. So I will never invoke spooky knowledge, and that is to say that I've had a private revelation, or that I have sensory vibrations going out on a plane of existence that none of you have access to. We are all equal, and we all feel the same. Everything is standing right there out in the open, and now it's just a question on how you start to conceive and perceive and objectify the truth. You start to discover, when you realize this, the most extraordinary thing that never cease to amazes man. And when it happens, some people will use symbolism of the relationship of God to the universe, wherein God is a brilliant light, only somehow veiled, hiding underneath all these forms that you see as you look around you. The truth is funnier than that. It is that you're looking right at the brilliant bright light now, but the experience you're having, which you call ordinary everyday consciousness, you're pretending you're not. You're not it. That experience is exactly the same thing as it. There is no difference to it at all. And when you find that out, you laugh yourself silly that that is the great discovery. In other words, you really start to see things, and you look, much as you would a paper cup, and you go into the nature of what it is, that you start to see what vision is, what smell is, what touch is. You realize the vision of the paper cup is the brilliant light of the cosmos. Nothing could be brighter. 10,000 suns couldn't be brighter on an atomic and subatomic level with regards to matter and reality. Only they're hidden, at the point of perception, in the sense that all points of the infinite light are so tiny, and you see them within the cup. They do not blow your eyes out. It is actually see the source of all light. Source is in the eye. If there was no eyes in this world, the sun probably not would emit any light. If there was no eyes in the world, the sun would not light or be light. You evoke light out of the universe in the same way you, by virtue having soft skin, evoked hardness out of wood. Wood is only hard in relation to soft skin. It's your eardrum that evokes noise out of the air and atmosphere. By you being this organism called into being, the whole universe of light and colour, sound, texture, hardness, heaviness, and everything. But in the mythology that we've sold ourselves on during the end of the 19th century, or that we've been indoctrinated into, when people discovered how big the universe was, and we live on a little planet in the solar system on the edge of a galaxy, which is a minor galaxy, allegedly, roughly, to loosely put it, everybody thought, we really are not important after all. God isn't there. God doesn't love us. Nature doesn't give a damn. And we started to put ourselves down. Actually, it is this little funny microbe, a tiny thing crawling on this little planet that is way out somewhere, who has the ingenuity, by the nature of this magnificent organic structure, to evoke the whole universe out of what would otherwise be mere quanta. There's music playing. There's a dance happening. You see, this little ingenious organism is not merely some stranger in this. This little organism on this planet is what the whole show is growing out there, and so relies upon its own presence. Well, now, here's the problem. If this is the state of affairs, which is so, and if the consciousness state you are in at this moment is the same thing as what we might call the divine state, and if you do anything to make it different, it shows you don't understand that it is so. So the moment you start practicing yoga, or praying, or meditating, or indulging in some sort of spiritual cultivation, you are starting to get in your own progressional way. The Buddha said, we suffer because we desire. If you can give up desire, you won't suffer. But he didn't say that as the last word. No, that gets taken out of context, much like the title of Darwin's book, the theory on the forms of evolution, the species of the theories of evolution there. Buddha said, that as the opening step of dialogue. If you say that to someone, they're going to come back after a while and say, yes, but now I'm desiring not to desire. And so the Buddha will answer, well, at last, now you begin to understand the point. You can't give up desire. Why would you even try to do that? It's already designed. So in the same way, you say you ought to be unselfish or give up your ego, let go and relax. Why do you want to do that? Just because it's another way of beating the game, isn't it? The moment you hypothesize that you are different from the universe, you want to get one up upon it, but you try to get one up on the universe, you are now in competition with it, which means you don't understand that you are it. You think that there's a real difference between self and other, but what actually you call yourself and what actually you call other are mutually necessary to each other, back and front, back and front. Back to the renegade master. They are really one. But just as magnet polarizes itself in a north and south polarity, it's all one magnet though. So experience polarizes itself as self on the other, but it is in fact one. If you try and make the North Pole get mastery of the South Pole to be the master of the North, you show that you do not know what's going on. A guru or a teacher who wants to get this across to somebody because he knows it himself. So when you know it, you know. You like others to see that too. You spread information. We shed the light into the dark room. We illuminate the Illuminati. The illuminated ones, when you come from a university and you get the mortarboard with the tassel and you pass, you are the alumni, the Illuminati. Lucifer, the light giver. What he does is he gets you into being ridiculous, harder and more assiduously than usual. In other words, if you are in contest with the universe, the master is going to stir up that contest until it becomes so ridiculous. He sets you such tasks as saying, now, of course, in order to be a true person, you must give up yourself. Be unselfish. So the Lord steps down out of heaven and says, first and great commandment is, thou shalt love thy Lord God. You must love me. Well, that's a double bind. You can't love on purpose. You can't be sincerely, purposely. It's like trying not to get or not to think of a green elephant while taking medicine. If a person tries to do it, so you know this is where Christianity is rigged. You should be very sorry for your sins, and though everybody knows they're not, but they think they ought to be, they go around trying to be penitent or trying to be humble, and they know the more assiduously they practice it, the faker and faker the whole thing seems to get. It's true. It seems, in this way, it's what's called the technique of reductio absurdum. If you think you have a problem and that, say, you're an ego and you're in difficulty, the answer that then the Zen master makes to you is to show me, or to say, show me your ego. I want to see this thing that has the problem. When Bodhidharma, the legendary founder of Zen, came to China, a disciple came to him and said, I have no peace of mind. Please pacify my mind. And Bodhidharma said, bring out your mind here before me and I'll pacify it. Well, he said, when I look for it, I can't find it. So Bodhidharma said, there, it is pacified. When you look for your own mind, that is to say your own particularized center of being, which is separate from everything else, you won't be able to find it. The only way you will know that it isn't there is if you look for it hard enough to find out that it's not there. So everybody says, all right, know yourself, look within, find out who you are, X, Y, and Z, because the harder you look, you won't be able to find it. And then you realize that it isn't there at all. There isn't a separate you. Your mind is everything. The only way to find that out is to persist in the state of delusion as long and as hard as possible. That's one way. I haven't said it's the only way, but it's one way. All spiritual disciplines, meditations, prayers, etc., are ways of persisting in folly, doing and resolutely and consistently what you're doing already. If a person believes that the earth is flat, you can't talk him out of that. He knows that it's flat. Look out the window and you see it looks obviously flat. The only way to convince a flat earther that the earth isn't flat is to say, well, let's go and find the edge. In order to find the edge, we've now got to be very careful not to walk in circles. We're never going to find it that way. What we're going to have to do is consistently go in a straight line, due west, along the same line. Can't do north versus south because there's a South Pole Treaty, that's right. So we'll go east versus west. across the Mediterranean, keep warm, you know, along the same line of latitude. And eventually, when we get back to where we started from, we can convince the flat earther that the earth is in fact round. Just one argument's sake, you know, one that I'd like to go and perform myself, for instance, and a great many of us would. That's the only way that will help, that will teach it physically, you know, logically, because people, they can't be talked out of illusions. But now there's another possibility. However, this is more difficult to describe. Let's say we take the basic supposition, which is the thing that one sees in the experience of Satori, or the awakening, or whatever you want to call, you know, conscionable. That this moment in which we're talking and which you're listening is in fact the now, the eternity. And that although we have somehow conned ourselves into the notion that this moment is rather ordinary, and we may not feel, well, that we are, you know, vaguely frustrated and worried and so on, and that it ought to be changed. This is so you don't need anything at all. But the difficulty about explaining that is that you must not try to do anything, because that's doing something. And how to explain that, because there's nothing to explain in the way it is now. And if you understand that, it will automatically wake you up. That's why Zen teachers use shock treatment to sometimes, you know, hit people or shout at them, create a sudden surprise, because that is the jolt, and suddenly it will bring you around. It brings you here, it wakes you up. You see, there is no road to here, because you're already there and you're already here. If you ask me how I'm going to get here, you know, it'll be like the famous story of the American tourist in England who asked some yokel the way to Upper Tottenham, the little village. The yokel scratched his head and he said, well, sir, I do know where it is, but if I was you, I wouldn't start from here. You see, when you ask, how do I attain the good knowledge of God? How do I obtain nirvana, liberation? All I can say is that would be the wrong question. Why do you want to attain it? Because the very fact you want to attain it is the only thing that prevents you getting there. It's not funny. I'm not trying to be clever here at all. I'm just reading out some wise words. You already have it. It's within. But of course, it's up to you. It's your privilege to pretend that you don't have it. And that is your prerogative. That's your game to play. That is your life. That is your game. And it's your time to waste. That's what makes you think, you know, you're an ego. And when you want to wake up, you indeed will wake up. You will become conscionable. The switch will go on. You will find the teacher. When you are ready to learn, a teacher shall appear. They're pointing very well there, you know. So just like if you're not awake, it shows you don't want to be awake. You're still playing the hide part of the game, hide and seek. You're still, as it were, the self-presenting. One is not the self. That's what you want to do. So you see, that way you're already there. When you understand this, a funny thing happens, and some people, they misinterpret it. You will discover as this happens that the distinction between voluntary and involuntary behavior disappears. You will realize that what you describe as things under your own will feel exactly the same as things going on, breathing or circulating your blood. You don't understand what's going on. You're liable to get crazy at this point and to feel that you are God in the Jehovah sense of God, to say that you actually have power over other people and that you could alter perhaps what they're doing, and that you are the omnipotent in a very crude literal Bible sense. A lot of people feel that, and they go crazy. They get locked up. They think they are Jesus Christ, Christ Jesus, and that everybody ought to fall down and kneel before your God, kneel before Zord. You know, that's where you've gone a little bit lost and wrong on the pathway to enlightenment. You got their wires crossed. Page 30 of 46. We're doing it all in one. Well done for keeping in. Well done for staying. Frosty. If you've got me on MP3 as a replay, then well done for playing it all in one. If you've taken it in sessions, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. They have gotten their wires crossed. They have not been able to let this experience happen to them, and they don't know how to interpret it. So be careful of that. Carl Jung calls that inflation. People who get the holy man syndrome. I suddenly discovered that I'm the Lord, and that I am above good and evil, and so on and so forth. Therefore, I start giving myself airs and graces. What? But the point is, everybody else is too. If you discover that, then you ought to know that everybody else is. For example, let's see in other ways how you might have realized this. Most people think that when they open their eyes and look around, what they're seeing is actually outside. It seems that, doesn't it? That you're behind your eyes, and that behind their eyes there is a blank. You can't see it all, so you have to turn around and see something else that's put in front of you. But behind their eyes there seems to be something that has no colour, that is not dark, that is not light. It is there from a tactile standpoint. That's what is behind your eyes. What is it? Well, it actually, when you look out there and you see all these people and the life going around, that's how it feels inside your head. The colour of this room is back there in the nervous system, where the optical nerves are at the back of the head, and they translate the data, and it's in there what you're experiencing given through the eyes. What you see out here is a neurological experience, and that hits you and you feel sensuous to that. So you may think that therefore the eternal world is all inside my skull, but you may have to correct that with the thought that your skull is also in the external world. So you suddenly begin to feel a moment, wow moment. What kind of situation could this be? It's inside me and I'm inside it, and it's inside me and I'm inside it. What? But that's the way it is. Inception. This is the Russian dolls scenario. This is getting out the matrix. That is the what you called transaction rather than the interaction between the individual in the world. Just like, for example, in buying and selling, there cannot be an act of buying less and simultaneously an act of selling and vice versa occurs. So the relationship between the organism and the environment is transactional. The environment grows the organism, and in turn the organism creates the environment. The organism turns the sun into light, but it requires there to be an environment containing a sun for there to be an organism at all. Chicken and egg. And the answer to is simply they're all one process. In the beginning there was the noon, and the Egyptian way of that being put out there as well. It is not that organisms by chance came into this world, but rather this world is the sort of environment which will grow organisms. It was that way from the beginning, much like a seed contains all the information to grow a plant. It was that way from right in the beginning. It was already encoded. The seed would explode in a way. The shell gets encased, cracked off, cracking the seed, and the flower grows. There are the two primary leaves there. Then it goes into the four. Then there's the 1, 2. You follow the sequence of Fibonacci there, and the golden ratios and so forth, and nature, mathematics and sciences. This is the way that things are, mathematics and things come in. Organisms, biological life grows by rules, laws, mathematics, and it does not deviate. So it's from the beginning, just the same way organisms are made in time, have arrived on the scene or out of the scene later than the beginning of the scene. But from the moment it went bang in the beginning, if that's the way it started, organisms like us sitting here, we're all involved in it. We're all subject to the regulatory rules that apply to that indicative symptoms of. So let's take the propagation electric current. I have an electric current running through wires that goes all the way around the earth. And here we have our power source, and we have a switch. There is a positive pole, there is a negative pole. Before the switch closes, the current doesn't exactly behave, water current, like water in a pipe. There is current, electric current, waiting here to jump the gap. As soon as the switch is flicked on or closed, the circuit is closed. When the circuit is open, the current won't flow. When the circuit is closed, the current doesn't even start until the switch is closed. From the positive pole, it never starts unless the point of arrival is already there. Now it will take an interval for that current to circulate and get going, and it's going to travel all the way around, and it's going to be a long run. But the finishing point has to be there, has to be closed before it will even start from the beginning. In a similar way, although in the development of a physical system that may be billions of years between the creation and the most primitive form of energy and the arrival of intelligent life, that billions of years in the middle between the bang and where we are now, it's just the same thing as the trip of the current around the wire and how long it takes to complete the circuit. It's already implied. It takes time for an acorn or a seed, to turn into a plant, and an acorn to an oak. The oak and the plant is already implied in the seed, is it not? So any lump of rock floating around space, and Muamua, and such things as, there is implicit human intelligence, somehow, sometime, somewhere, they all go together. So don't differentiate yourself. Stand up against this and say, I am a living organism in a world made a lot of dead junk, rocks and stuff. It all goes together. These rocks are just as much you as your fingernails. We need rocks. What are you going to stand on? David and Goliath needs a rock for that slingshot. What I think, awakening really involves is a re-examination of our common sense. That's what really we are doing with the cult revivals and the looking at history, his story. What myths are more fact than actual history. Who'd have imagined that? Crusade fiction, cross of fiction. Boom, again. Just please. That was rubbish. We've all got all sorts of ideas built into us, which seem unquestioned, obvious, and our speech reflects them. The commonest phrases: face the facts. Face them as if they was outside of you, as if there was a foreign entity, as if your life is something you simply encounter as a foreigner. Face the facts of the very matter. Our common sense has been rigged so that we feel as strangers and aliens in this world, and that is terribly plausible, simply because it's what we're used to. It's the only reason. But when you really start identifying and questioning and looking and exploring and using your due diligence, etymological root references, languages, precepts, axioms, maxioms, discovery in general, and you say that the way I have to assume life is I know everybody does, but does that make it true? No, it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily. And as you question this basic assumption that underlies our culture, that you find you get a new kind of common sense, losing the fear. It becomes absolutely obvious to you that you are continuous with the universe. For example, people used to believe that the people who lived in antiquities would fall off the edge of the world, and that was scary. But then when somebody sailed around the world, we all got used to it, and now we travel in jet planes and everything seems to be okay. Seems to be. I'm sorry for using this, but I can hear the chat and the chitter. But moving on, we have no problem about feeling that the earth is globular or the earth is actually flat. None whatsoever. So in the same way, Einstein, relativity, or theories of relativity, the curvature of the propagation of light, gravitational mass, that began to bother people, and Einstein first started talking like that. We're all used to it now. Quantum, string theory, quantum, and so forth. In a few years, it will be a matter of common sense to very many people that they are one with the universe. It'll be so simple. Hence the Christian disclosure going into law, religion, somewhat science, self, souls, religion, spirits, ghosts. Sorry, we didn't choose equity. Equity chose us, as it has you, by you being here and attending this lecture, presentation and works. So maybe if that happens, we shall all be in a position to handle our technology then with more sense, with love, and instead of hate for our environment. Now, therefore, what I propose we do is that instead of just ideologizing, we actually have a clinical experience. In a psychiatric and medical school, very common for a doctor to bring a patient out in front of the students and talk with the patient as kind of a demonstration. He says, I want you to recognize the difference between a psychopath, a manic depressive, a schizophrenic, or something else. They don't know what all these things means. He has a dialogue with the patient there. So let us suppose that I'm the patient and you are the students and doctors, and I suffer from what you would call the delusion that I am God. You might want to do something about me, or with me, or humour me, or start asking me questions. I'm perfectly willing to accept your offer of a medical examination. Is it mandatory? Okay, I accept. And possible treatment, and invite you to help yourselves. You ask me the question, when did we become God? Always been that way. Being awake and being asleep. Sleeping is like politics. One sleeps on the right. When you're tired, you sleep on the left. When you're tired, you sleep on the back. When you're tired of that, you sleep on your stomach. And it is thus the world goes round. Can I tell you a little bit about Satan? Although the matter is a little esoteric, I told you about it in the book of Job, where you will see in the court of heaven, Satan is the prosecutor, across the pond, district attorney. He is not the, as Christians imagine, the enemy is, of heaven and the enemy of mankind. He's merely the one, the character who sees the bad thing side of things and carries out the dirty work. Therefore, he saw Job and wondered whether Job was really a guy as what he seemed to be, and suggested that God should appoint a committee, an investigation, in fact, to find out. And the committee did its work very thoroughly. The case went against Satan because it proved in the end that Job was an honourable man. Now, you notice that we all pay the salary of the prosecutor or district attorney whenever there's a great criminal case before the public eye. People will begin to take the side of the underdog, and the prosecutor always has the less public sympathy than the defence, except possibly in political trials of recent. Trump, Salmond, Sturgeon, and the such likes as. On the right hand of God, now if they've mentalised this, you know where the defence is always on the right hand of the judge in court. So the right hand of God on the right hand of the judge in the court. Think of that Protestant court layout that I mentioned previous, and how we've done our discoveries: churches, boats, vessels, Latin, legalese, English, black. All right, it is our only mediator and advocate, which is a phrase referring to Jesus Christ our Lord. So there is the defence and there is the prosecution, and it is the function of Satan to be the prosecutor. There's a good deal more to it than that before all this started. Pro and se and cuter, good to hear observation deck going in as pro se, prosecutor, pro se and cuter, cuticle, nail, to do with skin, all that language babble there. This is a stage play. Courts are religious temples, in my opinion, of people that have a particular belief system. I don't share in that belief system, but I can take part in it with the introduction of the person. So there is a play, there is a stage, all right, there's an arrangement in the green room before coming on stage in which certain things were understood and that were only to be revealed when the curtain goes down at the end of the play. It's called the inner circle to the others. And many... Why are we hiding? Why do we hide from one another? We hide for the same reason. I hide for the same reason that you might want to hide. Man has free will to the extent that he knows who he is and not otherwise. I'm no more God than any of you. What is not God? There is nothing that is not God, or the God-like, Christ-like consciousness. When you find it, you'll find out it's like waking up from a dream. And after a while, one's experience to have what we would call a little bit of a deja vu experience, or you know what, haven't we been here before kind of a mentality comes around. Going round and round, you begin to wondering why we're going round in circles. Where am I going? And we go into that thought very thoroughly, and as soon as you ask yourself that question, you will begin to fantasize. And our technology is an expression of human desire for power, for what we want to possibly in the future achieve. So I simply set myself thinking through how far we could go, and soon I find myself in a great push button place. I had a fantastic mechanism before me with buttons available for every conceivable thing that man could wish. I spent quite a bit of time playing, mind you, science fiction wasn't there. It was buttons and things to press and so on, and you press this button and maybe music, symphonic music in 4-channel, 16-channel sound. Anything's possible. All pleasures are available. There is a button for everything in front of this machine right before you and I now. And you suddenly then notice a button. Amongst all of the buttons, this button is big and red and it's labelled surprise. You push that button and here we all are. Boredom is, of course, a problem. Boredom is the other side of creativity, the energy of creation that has the yang and the yin side of energy. That is called boredom, the balance, the scales, the yang and the yin and the yang, as you may know it. And you really don't need to understand anything else. As God, what responsibility do we feel to ameliorate the evil in the world? As we begin with the point that we are all responsible for the way the world is. If we couldn't feel that, we'd have to blame somebody else. I'm not willing to blame anybody else. I know that under various changing circumstances, it might be appropriate for me to be a bigger rascal as rascals have been. Now, as to improving the world is always improving. Now, this looks like a job for me now, everybody. Yes, that's the olden ways version of saying that. It might be appropriate for me to be as big as a rascal as rascals have been. Now, to improve the world is always improving. It may look to some people slow at pace, and it's improving even when it's in decline. It's improving because the world works in an undulatory process, like a wave. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. It can't go up all the time, because if it did, we wouldn't know that that was up. So it goes up some of the time and it goes down some of the rest, so we know what go on. It would be like being in space where everything was light, in a space where everything was light, and there's been nothing to write home about. There would be no black marks on the space. There would just be stars and no darkness, and it would be like a piece of perfectly empty paper. Similarly, to be in a completely black space would also be kind of unconscious, with nothing to write home about. Nothing would make a difference. So therefore, if you're going to have black, you won't know what is black unless you have some white. If you're going to have white, you won't know what's white unless you have some black. A koan is a Japanese word. A koan is a Japanese word for spiritual problem used in Zen Buddhism, such as, what is the sound of one hand clapping? No, you can't do that. It's just this one. These problems are given. What is the sound of one hand? What is the sound of one hand clapping? It's two ways of saying that. I should have just said, what is the sound of one hand? Because now I've given it, that isn't the sound of one hand clapping. These problems are given to those who ask questions concerning their spiritual development. Sometimes, as St. pointed out, St. Paul, at the point of commandments are given not in the expectation that they will be obeyed, but in the expectation that they will reveal something to those that hear them. That was St. Paul's comment on the whole of Mosaic law. The hereafter is, of course, now, because if you will examine it closely, there is nowhere else than now. And if you want to make hell of it, you can make hell of it. If you want to make heaven of it, you can indeed make heaven of it. If you want it to be purgatory, purgatory is purgatory. As such is your wish. It's all here, always was, always will be. So what is death? Death is an undulation in consciousness. How would you know you were alive unless you once had been dead? What is... was it unnecessary for Jesus, Buddha, others to have material possessions? It wasn't unnecessary for Jesus and Buddha to have material possessions. They said of St. John the Baptist that he was an ascetic, but of Jesus, the man who consorts with gluttonous ones and wine bibbers and comes eating and drinking, when Lady Mary poured precious ointment on his feet and anointed him, they said the same thing to the members of the vestry say to the minister today. Why all of this great expense? Couldn't all of this been sold for much money and given to the poor? It's a problem, sure, but you see, in many ways, when you get down to these very deep ethical problems, there is no easy decision one way or another. You must look at the problem from the point of view as an artist. Which way of doing this is in some way greater? It may be better to go off with a bang than with a whimper. It is always now the time. We're always in that eternal moment. If you press the button surprised, you press the button so that you forget whom you are. This is called in the Bible kenosis. In St. Paul's official epistle to the Philippians, he says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought not equality with God a thing to be grasped, but humbled himself and made himself of no reputation, and was found in fashion as a man, and became obedient servant to death, mortal. All right. So when I say we come with Christ as a Christ-like consciousness, you get this from the kenotic theory of creation, held by some of the Greek fathers that you mentioned earlier before, that the creation of the universe is the self-emptying or the self-forgetting of the Godhead. The universe is fundamentally a system which creeps up on itself and says, boo, shabba, what, stop jumping. I know, imagine that. But and then it laughs at itself for jumping, and you see every time it does, it forgets that it did it the time before. So it never becomes a bore, always a pleasure, never a chore. It's not necessary to travel. The question is, can I make myself into a point of consciousness and travel around the conscious, David, or the cosmos? And I see things from all sorts of places. Well, remote location and things like this, and traveling of. There's a great many ways of mentally doing, as Edgar Casey did, the Sleeping Prophet, remote vision, astrotheological travel. I say yes, but it necessarily isn't always necessary to travel. What? I know. Imagine that. As one ore is already there. In other words, I'm using your eyes where you are using mine. I'm giving you clarity, even though my words would be giving you clarity, vision connected with the eye. Not always physically eyes, but the information and knowledge and wisdom, clarity, vision, clear. So, you're using mine, I'm using yours, just in the same way my head is not my feet. It uses my feet. The head is very different from the feet. You couldn't possibly say the head and the feet are the same, but they are the same organism. So what do we do about boredom? You've pressed button surprise, and here we are. You say we're going around in circles. Well, we're going around in circles, but you see, going around in circles isn't necessarily such a bad thing, as some of you may have observed by looking at the night sky. That is in fact what the universe is doing, going on a right ascension meridian. It goes right, the Ram, 23rd of March, 23rd of Ram, Aries, right ascension meridian, things traveling to the right hand side. It goes deep, moving on, because I'm skimming across quite a lot in here. We could have got into segues of, but page 36 of 46, we are smashing it. Thank you for the donation, Project 69. As I gave the fist bump, the screen lit up. I take it you're enjoying the show, and this document will be given to all very, very soon, along with the other one that I'm nearly finished, that I'm on the last day of, the last seminar. Come on, David, remember your work. Does the Vatican own your soul? We're on one more day to go. But I thought I'd do this today of days, just to we're going around in circles. The universe is going around in circles. Lots of things go around in cyclical cycles, is another way of putting it. Cyclical cycle coming to completion. And so it's a dance. And when you dance, you don't dance to get somewhere as a form of transportation. You dance as an expression. It's very profound. So when you wake up, you will turn the head confusion into a dance. You lose the fear. You become strong. You become confident. And many things happen, as I've said in this publication. So you turn the confusion into the dance. You go back to the question, what is the alternative to stopping doing the job you're doing and say doing it with less, or even having more fun? So there are ways of making the most boring activity into a dance. I suppose you will have to drive a bus in London or New York, which is a very harrowing job in the ordinary way. You must not take anything serious about it. That would be rule number one. It doesn't matter if you don't get there on time, but it would be fun to go as fast and consistent with safety, and therefore you may swing that bus and you may take the whole thing as it's not serious. That is the nature, saying ritual, when you have a procession. Now, people who don't understand religion don't necessarily know how to make the right kind of procession. Now this bit's genius. There are those who go into procession like a military march. They don't understand, because their objective is to get there, and they want to get there, and they want to get there fast. They don't take a look at the scenery and the surroundings as they're moving forward. There are those that go and they dawdle like ducks. They take ages, they take too long, and they don't understand that they're trying to be dignified and proper. And then there are those, on the other hand, who walk as if they had already arrived. This is the way that you will find that kings walk, because the king is the center, and he is always where it's at. Where it is at is where the king is, by definition. You walk like a king. When a king walks, he walks like a queen walks. They walk like they're already at the destination. No dawdling, no rushing, somewhere in the middle. If you walk this way, bam, bam, bam. Gotta get some music in it. It's been too long. Walk this way. Yes. That's the one. Then even people who are practicing meditation take up monotonous things for fun. Meditation is supposed to be fun, all right? Anything monotonous can be treated in the same way. This is the way, one of the ways of overcoming boredom. Boredom is a big problem for energetic, biological, sentient, conscious, mass, as energy always is on the go. Is God omniscient? It depends what you mean by the word. A lot of think that omniscience is like knowing everything that's in the Encyclopedia Britannica. That is not omniscient. That is intellectual elephantiasis. Let me explain this question because it's always important. And when anybody announces that he or she is God, people say, will you tell us such and such of the height of Mount Blanc? You tell me, look it up in the Encyclopedia Britannica is what you can do. The thing is this, what we ordinarily call knowledge is the translation of life into words. And that is a very cumbersome process, because if we had to translate the process into words every time we took a breath, we'd never get around to it. It takes so long to describe and think through the whole physiology of the breath. Therefore, we do not think, we do it without thinking about it. And I find that I am shining the stars just in the same way. I mean, if you wanted it in words, it's going to take us a long time. Words are strung out in a long line and sentence. If you are God, how do you find such difficulty in finding peace and tranquility in yourself? That's because you're looking for it away from the place in which you are seeking it, apart from the experience which you have at this moment, and you are regarding that experience by saying it's pretty disappointing, I would like something better than this. The trouble with that is that it splits you into two pieces, and once you're split into two pieces, you then become lost. Because you made a difference between the experience you are now having on the one hand and yourself, oneself, whom is having it on the other. You wish you could get away from that experience. Now, the truth of the matter is you can't, because you are what you experience. It is a myth purely that there is some sort of experiencer who has the experience. You are what you know. It is not I know something. There is simply a process called the knowing. You could say the knowing, the world has two poles, north and south. So the knowing ball has the knower and the known, but only in that sense. Not that knowing changes, it changes itself. But if you try to stand outside it and change it, it will be like standing outside of your hand and trying to move your hand from being outside of your body. Now, here lies a difficulty. In other words, that would be the difficulty for God in the press the button surprise situation. So you feel the flow there. I like how he puts that. And where do you think you want something different than what you have? But you think that then you have got to ask yourself the question, what is it that you really want? This is the most fundamentally important question you will find. And if you go into it very, very deeply, you may change your mind about it. But in reality, you generally do have what you want, what you think you attract. You bring what you want, not whether you want it, yes or no one. I desired that one, but one, you get what you want, you get what you wish for. You wishful thinking, you get what you attract. You attract what you preach, what you sow, you reap what you sow. Practice what you preach. It's all there. I find myself, Papa don't preach. I find myself so scared. Shut up, Madonna. That I wonder if I also feel that I was God and I am God. I'm scared about that. How do I then manage that, David? Well, one of the ways of not being bored is to scare yourself, yeah? You go and we all go to the movies just to be scared, or put on a scary film sometimes to scare yourself out of your wits, to stop the boredom. So we put some limits on it. Indeed, before we go, we say it's not real, it's only a play. We've seen this, in the safe outline of the proscenium arch back in the back of our minds. It's sort of a Gidanka. Gidanka. We know it's only a play. How do you know it is? After you see all the totality of the task, the actor on the stage is to come on so that the audience thinks it's real. He has them crying, he has them shaking with fear, he has some of them sitting on the edge of their chairs. Well, that's just one ordinary Joe actor, but supposing the actor of the play is the real big actor and the real big play, now that would seem rather real, wouldn't it? So that's what happens when the house catches on fire. What happens if I do not do anything about the boredom? That's another way you can explore boredom. You can bore into boredom. You can watch it. Sometimes when you're bored, the only thing you can do is to watch it, because even for God, you can't lift yourself up by your own bootstraps, because that is by nature of the definition impossible. Stand inside the bucket and lifting yourself up with the handle. Why else does one come out here and go on stage except to make myths? What is my motivation for going out on stage and for talking and doing works? That's like asking why is there a universe? Children are befuddled by being asked, why. They ask why about everything, because you always look away from what you're asking about to its antecedents that won't lead you anywhere at all. Why am I here? And I answered that question, and somebody asks, well, why is that? Then somebody says, well, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And you get back and back and back, and eventually you get tired of answering. And so fathers and mothers, when their children say, why mummy, why daddy, why, the mum and dad say, oh, shut up, eat your lollipop, watch TV. But what happens, you see, when you retrace the causation of things into the past, it all begins to fade out in silence and no answer. Why? Because it didn't actually begin in the past. The universe begins in the now moment. It didn't begin in the past, and the past trails back from the now, like the wake of a ship, the disturbed amount of water that the ship leaves in its trail. If everything is God and there is no time except now, what's the role of chance, David? Chance pairs with order. And we will say randomness, and it pairs with order. It's part of the nature of order. If you know what you mean by order, you know that you mean contrast with randomness. And if you know what you mean by randomness, you know what you mean by contrast with order. So if you want to have order, you must have randomness, and vice versa. This is a very dangerous conversation, and one that I thoroughly agree with, but we didn't press the play button surprise and come here to play it safe, did we? All profound ideas and questions are dangerous. As dangerous as the Hadron Collider and CERN. It's dangerous to go into science, as we know too well by the what I've just mentioned. It's dangerous to go into medicine, as what's going off right now with AstraZeneca and the concerns there. It's dangerous to go into writing, because the pen is often mightier than the sword. Touche, okay? And so I don't think we should withdraw from certain things because they are dangerous. But I entirely agree with you that if it were in the spirit of God to go about social reform, I would be failing to realise the construction of my own universe, which is that when you interfere with it, you've got to know exactly how you are interfering. Otherwise, the most amazingly unexpected things will happen, like a boat turning over in the Zeus Canal. Sorry, the Suez. Suez, right down Suez, then right down Zeus. Look at the similarity of that, the God Canal. So when people ask for miracles, they don't realise what miracles involve. Watching yourself, being aware, we are watching. There is an interesting thing that comes up with this respect to the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutra, where they talk about the witness. There is, as if it was behind our ordinary self with its emotions and involvements, a witness self that does nothing more than perceive what happens. Now, this is the Atman, or the Purusha, which is not involved, and some of you, no doubt, especially in times of crisis, have suddenly discovered this sort of witness centre behind everything that just isn't involved. It's like it's detached from your emotions, the witness, the observer. Most terrible things can be going on, but the witness, it remains impassive. Now, when we go into these states, we've got to be very careful about the descriptive language, because the descriptive language makes the witness seem something apart from what is happening in such a way that if we want to become really sorts of schizzy and catatonic about things, we can always be withdrawn and go in and identify ourselves with a solitary and uninvolved witness who is merely a hangout for the ego. As when the police raid a house in which there are burglars, the burglars know they will be caught if they're on the ground floor. So they go up to the first floor. Then the police come up to the first floor, and then the burglars go up to the second floor. And finally we end up and find ourselves on the roof, under the open sky, under the infinite. And in this way, this is why the Buddha did not teach about the Atman and the real self within us, because the Buddha knew that we would use the real self as a hideout for the ego. When Krishnamurti tries to explain this, he doesn't talk about the witness, he talks about awareness. And people say to him, who is aware? What is aware? And he seems a little sticky in his answer here, because what is the matter is, What the matter is that people asking the question are bewitched by grammar. People asking the question are bewitched by grammar, London grammar perchance, ideally. They are using a language, a foreign language, in which it is part of the grammatical convention that the verb always has a noun subject. Now, how on earth do we get verbs started by noun? I ask, how can a thing start a process? Languages is a tool, and furthermore, legalese is a foreign language. Latin is a foreign language. Dog and pig Latin is a foreign language. All capital letters is a foreign language. Italics and bold types, fonts, hieroglyphs are a foreign language. Surely this really is the same problem Descartes was wrestling with when he tried to find out how spirit could influence matter or how mind could influence body, because everybody knows that all proper ghosts walk straight through walls without disturbing the bricks. So how can the ghost in the machine, as Kessler put it, the soul in the body, how could it do anything to the body? No connection, two different realms. The point is, when we're talking about this awareness, what we call thought, feelings, sensations, emotion, what we could say in a very clumsy way is it's aware of itself, the very nature. There wouldn't be sensation without awareness. You don't have to do something which is aware of it any more than you have to have a thing called lightning which does something called flashing. The flashing is the lightning, and so awareness is the one who's aware of it. I would say this awareness, if I say I am aware, as Lord William James, as the word, I'm sure I'm aware, as the word, as William James suggested, is simply a word of position. Awareness, I am aware, is simply a word of position, like this or here, awareness here and awareness there. Life is like one great koan. No, death is not the solution. It has not the solution, otherwise it wouldn't happen. This is what is hard for Westerns especially to understand. If you understand the yang and the yin, you don't need to ask any further questions. What is not a component of Western common sense is that nothing is something. Now that may sound a little contradictory, but it can be explained. We treat nothingness as if it was infective, as if it wasn't really important at all. And yet when we look out at the night sky, we see the stars in space and try and imagine what the heavens would look like if there wasn't any space. And obviously there wouldn't be any stars. They could all be jammed together in a lump. There are various objections to that. How would you see the edge of the lump to know it was a lump without space around it? Furthermore, we know that when we investigate the constitution of matter physically, that at the atomic level there's more space in something than there is anything else, such as matter. Most of it is empty, which leads a physicist at the Argonne lab at the University of Chicago, who had become a little nutty. He was so impressed with the emptiness of matter that he went around the most enormous padded slippers in case he should fall through the floor. So the point I'm making is this: if space is essential to solid, it's perfectly obvious then that nothing is essential to something. If you can't have something without nothing, that means that nothing is very powerful stuff, because something comes out of nothing. It's a dogma of the Western thought we expressed in the Latin phrase ex nihilo nihil fit. Out of nothing comes nothing, but that's not so. Out of nothing comes something. So the Latin phrase there is wrong. Now you would say that if there is something coming out of nothing, there must be some kind of mystery inside nothing. It must have a secret structure of some kind. I mean, there must be some sort of electrical goings on. And now this trouble they have about cosmology, how could this world generate? How could it just be out of free-flowing hydrogen? No, it's just a bit much simpler idea that it comes out of real solid nothing. It's so simple. If you listen, you live in a world where there's only sound for a moment. You hear every sound coming out of the silence. So where do these sounds emanate from? They come out of silence. Suddenly you can accustom yourself to seeing the light doing the same thing. You can open your eyes and see all this world emerging out of nothing and fading off into the past. That's why the future is unknown, because the future is zero, and everybody who tries to know it. And that's the whole endeavor of trying to be God. You don't need to try to be God. You are God. If you try to be God, it means you don't know that you are. Therefore, you try to know and dominate the future. You believe prophets, things like, You know, all prophecy is doing is simply contaminating the future with the past, projecting what we know upon the unknown. And that is why things like astrology, although in the initial stages seem interesting, could be predicted as rather ridiculous. Because if you know the future, there's no surprise for you, as a completely known future is then one's past, as you've already known. The question is now about, really, there is no now. The future is and the past come together in a singularity. The future turns into the future turns into the past, and we get this frantic feeling, where did it go? Let's take the small view first of all, that now is infinitely short, and yet it's the only thing that is. In this case, the whole world is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. So when the Emperor Akbar once was feeling a little sorry for himself and asked his jewelers to make him a ring that will restrain prosperity and support in life adversity, the jeweler made him a ring and gave it to the Emperor Akbar, and the Emperor saw written on it, "It will pass." Now the other side of the matter is this, that this short now is an illusion of the clock. We make the second marks on the clocks as thin as consistent with visibility, and therefore we always think of the present as crossing a hairline as fast as possible, thin line. A second is chink and it's gone. There is nowhere else. But now everything that happens is happening now. It is like your field of vision. Your field of vision isn't just a point of light. Your field of vision is an oval and is not fuzzy at the edges. It just ceases to be at the edges. Now there's plenty of room in it to see something move across. So in your field of time, your now, there is enough now to hear a phrase of music. If there weren't, you wouldn't be able to make it out. Melodies, because there just be instantaneous notes, and with no connection between them, you would not hear the intervals. So now is a big sloppy thing, and it comes out of nothing. The question is there need for man to seek for a meaning of his life? No, there is no need for man to seek meaning in his life or of the universe. There is no need to seek for a meaning. I use this word in a rather definite way. For me, meaning is a function of signs, particularly of words and symbols. Meaning is the referent of words. As when we take the word water, the meaning of it is something drinkable, whereas the sound water is not drinkable. So therefore, if we ask life to have a meaning, we look for something other than life to be that meaning. Therefore, we reduce life to it being mere words and mere symbols. Now, of course, you may use the word meaning in a less precise way and say, now, although the music of Bach has no meaning in the sense it's not like the music of Tchaikovsky designed to imitate natural events and noises, nevertheless, it has meaning in the sense that it enchants us. The patterns of it ravish us in the same way as abstract patterns in a arabesque, more water please, sense that it enchants us. That it's a little different sense of the word meaning. And yes, I would say that life has to, that kind of meaning, but you don't seek it, because if you seek it, you lose it. The process of life is an essential musical process, a dance which has no meaning except itself. It is going round in circles. We love to spin in circles when we're dancing like children. Children love to spin around in circles till they get dizzy. That's fun. And so the articulation of wonderful patterns is the meaning of life. If you seek for meanings, now this applies to all seekers, and I'm sorry, growth seekers, seeking seems to be invariably taking you away from what you're looking for, because every search supposes that one will find it at a latter point, not now. In the next moment, that somebody, by some gimmick, by some exercise, by some process of transformation, will later discover what they want. This is called postponement. Well, this is a matter of words, my initiates. You may think the dancing is superficial, where I think it's profound. I suggested two meanings of the word meaning, one of which is merely reducing life to being symbolic or something else, always being beyond. Then I'm going to ask, what's the meaning of that? Then we get into the infinite regression of questions. I feel that instead of getting into these infinite regressions of what is beneath, what is behind, look, it's right out in front of you now. And when you catch on to that, now will get very profound. All right, that's the penny drop moment. I mean, it's the moment where nothing becomes something. And I don't see how much more profound you can get than that. The moment when nothing becomes something. Seeking, it can be fun. Sea and king, king of the sea. C the K, I in the G. C the K in the G. Seeking can be fun. It won't get you what you're looking for. Seeking is a way of finding. Let's put it off. You see children on a hot day, they're terribly thirsty. They say, let's have an ice cream, let's have a drink. And the other kids say, no, let's get thirsty first. Then when we finally get the drink, the ice cream, it will be a real pleasure. This is the principle of postponement. And everybody who is questing, who is practicing yoga, Zen meditation, all that kind of thing, would be putting off the ice cream and the drink. When you ask why, I repeat, this is a barren question. Why you do it? Why did this happen? It goes into questions that peters out. This is not important. What is important surely is the immediate now. Now, not why are we here, but what are we here? Unless you live in the eternal now, consciously, you have no use for plans, because people who live in the future or live for the future, when their future plans come to pay off, they're not in the now here enjoying them. They're also in another future, planning for another future, so they would never actually indeed catch up with themselves. When you make plans, you plan in the now, and that can be a fun making plans, but for goodness sake, do it in the now. Don't always remember yourself, ahead, a front, come back to the moment and bask in it, then project forward again. Be the change, come back to the now and bask in it. Otherwise, always being in front, like me being giddy, rebel without a pause in the beginning, we have problems. You have to rejoice in your reap what you sow. So you rush in life just like somebody swallowing food so fast they can neither taste it nor digest it. The searching in a spirit, know that the search is more fun than the finding, like when you're traveling and exploring, for example, going somewhere. The real joy of the adventure is the journey. The fallacy of the jet plane, that it abolishes distances between places, and all places which have a distance are now abolished, and between them they are referred to as the same place. Places which have a distance abolished between them become the same place. So there's no point going to Hong Kong, China, Tokyo if it is London and Los Angeles, New York. The comment about seeking is it's necessarily a road. Life taking a road or seeking is conceivable as readiness to receive. Seeking could be classified as readiness to receive. You're ready to change. You're ready to step on the road. You're ready to explore a different option. The path, the stages of the path, the steps of the path are used in both East and West. But the Chinese word for the way is Tao, T-A-O. I know. It's not D-A-O, T-A-O. And the path is what we're looking for in the Chinese sense. The Tao is the witcher in which there is no witcher. And to be in harmony with the way, to be on the way, you see. But the Tao isn't going anywhere. And that's like when the Chinese poet wandering in the forest and he looks at the cloud and he says, where are the clouds going? Nobody knows. Where does his path lead? Nobody cares. He doesn't say it like that because he's Chinese and I can't speak Chinese, but legalese or Japanese, as you please. I'm wandering on in a great open forest without the thought of return. That's a poetic feeling to the Far East, both of the Japanese and the Chinese. They call that spirit Yugen, the mysterious going of nowhere, of things, the wandering spirit. So that sort of seeking is a different, it's different comparatively from anxiety to get something in the future which you don't have now. Riches, wealth, marriage, house, things like that. Pure hedonism is a quest for pleasure. The hedonist, in that sense of the word, would not live in the eternal now. He found it not too altogether enjoyable. He would then read romances of the past, fantasies of the future to get away from the now, because what he's looking for is pleasure. And when we look for pleasure, you see we split ourselves, we divide ourselves from pleasure in seeking it, and in trying to get away from pain, we divide ourselves from pain, not realizing that is what creates pain, the division, joy division, back in the day. In the morning sun, New Order, joy division, joy division. It's the division of experience, so that our whole awareness of experience is broken and we are then disintegrated. Categories do not really exist in nature. Categories are like taking a network printed on cellophane and putting it over a picture of a forest, then numbering the trees in the forest according to what squares, you know, they represent on the cellophane. That's categorization. I said it was totally empty. Wait a minute, it's a category in the sense that something is limited, so it has an edge, and that's what you see in the yang yin diagram. What I was trying to say about pain is that we're all in a split relationship, split titles with the contents of our experience. The knower, N-O-A-H, and K-N-O-W-E-R, knower, and the known. Then there is the knower who is opposed with a known called pleasure, pardon me, and tries to identify with it. The knower is confronted with a known called pain and tries to be disentangled from it. But it is this very split, it is this trying to get away from pain that makes pain painful. It is as though you got caught in some brambles and you pulled away and they just dug more deeply into your skin. You would have to go to the other direction and push into the brambles to get out of the bush. I mean, it's only a metaphor. The point is that as we keep up this distinction of the knower from the known, we're always going to be running away. I want to change my experience. There's a fundamental, therefore, escape in every project to transform consciousness. There is an escape from what is, and when you realize you cannot get away from what is, nor should you, nor might you, but you can't, then at that point when you realize you can't get away from what is, there's nothing left of you but to watch it. And for the first time you are then taking a good look at your real self. To know self, know thyself, man in the mirror, cognition, joining of two, becoming one. Your real self is the happening. The Chinese in nature, they call it what is so of itself, and that is you. That is you, this happening, and that is everything you're aware of, and that is your happening, and a good deal more besides. You're not aware of all of yourself, like you don't have an immediate vision of the contents of your stomach. You've not got eyes down there. See, I know when I'm confronted with beautiful, or when I pass into beautiful, as I know when I pass into the ugly. When I try to say what these my criteria are, all I'm doing is I'm trying to find form of words that will apply to all my different sensations of beauty or ugliness. The problem is not to know what is beautiful, but know how to put it into linear language. That's where the complexity comes in. We're all very well known at what is beautiful, but when we try to talk about it, especially when you're a teenager doing it for first times, wearing your dad's boot, words might disappear. Here's our fundamental problem, because you see in a certain way what we mean by sense is God. Now it is not what that God doesn't have a sense of, you know, humor and nonsense. Look at a giraffe, and for heaven's sakes, could God make a stone so heavy that he couldn't lift it? That is an equivalent question to say, could God make a dead body into a living body? That is not the same question as asking, could a dead body be a living body? And that is the same question as asking, could the head be the feet? One of the most interesting meditations is to think about death and imagine what it would be like to go unconscious and never become conscious again. That is, as Keats said of the Grecian urn, it teases you out of thought. What do you think of that? Good heavens, fancy never coming to again. You get a mirror image, a thought, which is about your birth. My goodness, you came to without ever having going unconscious. That's pretty weird, and seems to me that if it happened once, it's most likely it can happen again. And what happens is this: when you die, it will momentarily go blank, and the next thing you know, you're going to be being born again, just as it's been done before. Just that every I that comes into this world is I. It is me, it is you, and on this level it is then diversified, but yet I is always central. Everyone feels they are the center of the universe. Oh wow, it went weird. Told me I'd got no tinterwebbles, but we do. Sorry about that. Wise action is never the result of choice. That was interesting. All wise action is never the result of choice. Why is wise action never the result of choice? Because choice implies ignorance, indecision. And when you know what to do, you don't choose it without, you just do it. What question could you ask about love? What is love? Love is not a what. Love is the energy of the world, and nobody can say what that actually be. Now, there are times when it is important to talk nonsense because we can discover the energy of the universe through nonsense. But when you say you take a sound that really doesn't mean anything, much like the om, That's the energy of the universe. As you listen to sound, that's why music is a marvelous support for the meditation or meditation. Listening to sound, just listening to the hum. There goes the energy of the universe. Meditation is centered in the here and now. Done for some other reason, it is in meditation. You may choose to meditate upon a subject to get clarity upon it and go deep in it, such as we have with law, life, and etc. Or you may choose to meditate and go silent, and I find the latter the greater part of meditation, and see what trip and journey you indeed go on. So it will stop dead right there if you meditate and it's not in the here and now. Satori is a kind of aha, eureka moment, only specifically applying to discovering whom and what you are. The clear light is, you say, I saw the light. It doesn't necessarily that there is a physical hallucination or a beam of light. It just means there's a flash, everything becomes clear, everything becomes transparent. You may even be aware of feeling that. The problem vanished, and so therefore you stop asking the question. Is there a risk to being God, David, and to having this consciousness and this Christ-like consciousness? No, there is no risk to being God. The risk is being a person, a persona, full publicly liable as the Mr., surname, date of birth, etc., and being human. Humans are flawed and mortal, so being looking at yourself in a more confident, natural, harmonic resonance way is the way forward. So we've just done 23,539 words minimum across 46 pages. We finished. I didn't go too fast, but I had to pick up pace because I'm hungry. I need toilet, and 3 hours 26. I could get all the minutes back of these videos all in one go. I'd have a lot of minutes. I'm just going to say hello to the rest that are in here watching. Give us a thumbs up. Thank you for the 25 shares, and thank you for your time. Thank you for the donation. Project 69. Bless up, much love. Every little helps. I take it that it's hitting the right spots. So I'm just going to say thank you all, scribes. Hope you like the studio today. Got my little Greece ensemble, and I do like that one. It's kind of Romany type, Greeky type. I did buy it from Greece. That means Greece at the top. It's rather fantastic. I don't wear it often. That's why it's some years old, and it's kept its goldenness. But love and light for all. We're going to expand on this. This is a publication of following on from the Proclamation of Sovereignty, explain how we've found remedy, why we've found remedy, what path and access we've used, and we can prove that is in this Christian nation, internationally recognised, locally recognised, and prescribed for you and your consideration. So just want to say thank you to one and all. Epic times, incredible times. All right, I'm going to be on admin this weekend. Kevin and I are live in the private tomorrow, and we will get him to come out and play peekaboo. I know how much you love and miss him, so I'll give the love to Kelvinius Maximus of Philistinius, and you'll be hearing hopefully him soon. And I have much to do. Still got to catch up with Life in the Mix, Observation Deck, the usual run-of-the-mill, E-Star, Be East, Consciousness, Depression, Suicide, Anxiety, Souls. You see why I brought this? This is another one as big as Neville Goddard's Powers of Manifestation. When will we be closing that down? The third part will be coming soon. I couldn't resist bringing this one to you for reasons of, and going into the light, the rebirth of consciousness, of man, of matter. Full armor. I love it when you say that, Jay. Full armor, guys. It's like a military statement in a peaceful, non-military movement. It's just couldn't be more funnier to me that we are putting on the armor, but we're not having a battle. There will be no blood. There will be no stabbing, killing, raping, pillaging, and what's gone off in the past. But there is a battle, and there is armor, and we're going into it head on. So yes, bless up, preach. As much as you can, share, download, by all means make the MP3. If you've coming to the end of the meditation now, it's time to wake up out of the 3 hours and 29 minutes we've taken to go through that journey. I hope you've had a nice rendition, trip, visaged, metamorphosized. Could that tooth? Captain, pal! It's just great. I'm going to show you how to make one of these. Trust me, for pence, so you too can disguise and not be a pirate. I forgot the chat on Telegram. The first chat, we were going to have a voice chat on Telegram. Some of you may have been in that and thought we were going to have a chat Wednesday. Things cropped up. I forgot to remind myself, and things got a bit giddy this end privately, so I had to attend. And then it come to about I don't know, 9:30, 10ish, and I thought, ooh, we were having a chat at 8. I saw my reminder and I've apologized for that. I will be there next time round, and happy you know, whatever it is to you. It's not Easter for me. Happy solstice is a way of putting it. Happy Easter, Christians and the likes, non-Christians. I hope this enlightens and helps out and gives you a little bit of clarity. It's good fun. It's done with respect. It's done with love to Judaism, you know, Islamists and so forth. We'd like to join as a fam, eh? These are my reasons and my definitions and articulations for everything I've put forward for the you know, private and the public, the persons, what's going off here, how it's going off. Yeah, if you like the look of these cloths that I have behind me, I've got the Eye of Ra, and I've got this one with the scales. I think you know that might be Akhenaten. And I forget, I'm gonna let you guess that one, who that one is. And then we got Thoth and the bird-headed, ibis-headed man himself that you see there. We'll speak again soon. I'll get the other backdrop up, and proper boa tell thee, whatever you do, spread love, spread sovereignty, help love, help show love, help in these crazy times. That's all I'm going to say. And we need to reflect on this. I need to let this digest, along with Does the Vatican Own Your Soul? And then we'll have a get together again, and we will get back on this, and we'll give you a chance to say, all right, so make notes. Thank you to all. Menza, Jay, Jerry, came on, Gansders, Anne, Simon, Byrne. Who else do we have? That's it. Jay, Yar, I like to say. Thank you on the replay. Thank you for the donation. Project 69. Thank you all for giving a I am fingers. That was a brilliant comments there. And we'll see you soon. Bud and Moon. Ciao bello.